Ahmadwa, Panduai Roshlum, Stand Face Jerusalem. Blessing of the new moon. Barakat Yahweh, Basham, Yehoshai, Asherah, Nathan Lanawe, Hakadash, Bashalawam, Taware, Aman. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai that gives to us the Sabbath and peace. Thank you, so be it. The Alim Shariah Machad, Psalms 121. Anya Harayim Aimimye O Harim Mayan Yabu Azariah Azariah Yabu Mayahu Shai Shai Shamayim Warataza La Yanathan Lamawat Regalia Yala Yanawam Shashramarka Hana La Yanawam Wala Yashan Shashramar Yashvili Yahweh Shemaria Yahweh Tazali Ayo Yad Yim Yad Yawamam Hashamash La Hakaya Wayarak La Balayala Yahweh Yashamaria Makab Ra Yashamar Napasha Yahweh Yashamar Habalakya Wabawaya My Fa Wa I Wulam Basham Yahweh Sheth Wada Aman.
Psalm 121. I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my help. My help cometh from the Lord, which made heaven and earth. He will not suffer thy foot to be moved. He that keepeth thee will not slumber. Behold, he that keepeth Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is thy keeper. The Lord is thy shade upon thy right hand. The sun shall not smite thee by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord shall preserve thee from all evil, shall preserve thy soul. The Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth, even forevermore. Amen.
Amen. Shemaiah Sharela, Hero Israel. Shemaiah Sharela, Yahweh, Eloheinu, Yahweh, Akkad. Shemaiah Sharela, Yahweh, Eloheinu, Yahweh, Akkad. Shemaiah Sharela, Yahweh, Eloheinu, Yahweh, Akkad.
Deuteronomy 6 and 4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our power is one Lord. Amen.
Amen. Tapalaya, how the Lord's Prayer. Abinawa Shabbat Shemayim Kodash Hayya Shemke Yahweh Malakwavka Taba'a Rotazawanka Hayya Aisha Barataza Kaba Shemayim Tamanawa Lacham Yawam Zad Wasalak Lanawa Kabawat Nawa Kasalak Nawa Kabawat Yanawa Wala Abiyarnawa Al Nasayawan Al Bo Hawashinawa Murai Kaya Laka Hamalakwa Wa Allah Wa Thapara Wa Walam Aman.
Matthew 6 and 9. After this manner, therefore, pray he, our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
Aman. I Sharamatazawa, the Ten Commandments. La'ad Yahayat Lakad Alahayim Akarim Alpanyat La'ad Taishad Lakad Paso Wala'ad Taibadam La'ad Talakwakaf Shamwa Yahweh Alayaka Lashua Zakar Af Hayawam Hashabath Lakwadashwad Kabad Abika Wa Amaka La'ad Taratazak La'ad Tana'ab La'ad Taganab La'ad Tainad Shakur La'ad Takhamad Ko Asherat Lara'ika Aman.
Exodus 20, verse 2. I am the Lord thy power, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other powers before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy power, am a jealous power, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy power in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy power. In it thou shalt not do any work. Thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy power giveth thee. Thou shalt not kill, but thou shalt not murder. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's. Amen.
Amen. Yeshua, be seated. Barakatu Yahweh, Ba'ashim Yahweh Shai, Asheran, Tanawa, Parya, Gapan, Twada Aman. La Yahweh, Ba'ashim Yahweh Shai, Av, Yashar. English translation. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, that gives to us the fruit of the vine. Thank you, so be it. To Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, with Israel. Ahmad Wab, Plainway Jerusalem, stand and face Jerusalem. Barakatu Yahweh, Haggadah, Rakawam, Nabiyah, Wanawa'eh, Aliyawan, Malak, Shal, Shamayim, Warataza, Wakad, Dabayim, Kayayim, Wagam, Hamashiach, Mayahawe, Arawanawe, Ahabnawe, Hapalet, Yawaitaza, Yahawashai, Zakarnawe, Yahaweh, Baratazawan, Ainka, Yasha'ala, Izarnawe, Bana, Wazak, Yasha'ala, O Nanawe, Yam Yan, Aitha, Kayawamyam, Makwadam, Babakusha, Shalak, Mike Allah, Watazwadak, Alahayam, La, Maganawa, Rapharnawa, Washamar, Alnawa, Bakur, Shalak, Haroka, Shao, Yahweh Shai, Lanawa, Lalabanawa, Rabiim, Kakama, Thabawana, Wada Aif, Shao, the Barka, Basham, Yahweh Shai, Thawada, Tham Yev, Waiwalam, Maman. English translation. Blessed are you, Yahweh, the great, merciful, mighty, terrible, most high power, King of heaven and earth and all things living. And also the anointed from Yahweh, our Lord, our friend, and wonderful counselor, Yahweh Shai. Remember, Yahweh, favorably your people Israel. Help us build and gather Israel, most high, we beg you, right now in the days of old. Please send Michael and the righteous powers to protect us, heal us, and watch over us. mainly send the spirit of Yahweh Shai to us to teach us much wisdom, knowledge, and understanding of thy word. In the name of Yahweh Shai, thank you always and forever, so be it. Repeat the Hebrew only. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai that gives to us the law. Barakatah Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Asherat, Natan Lanawa, HaTawawah. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai that gives to us light to see. Barakatah Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Asherat, Natan Lanawa, Awar, Lara Awat. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai that gives to us the ram's horn to call the people. Barakatah Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Asherat, Natan Lanawa, Karan, Hayel, La Korab, Ha'aim. Yeshabah, be seated. All right, so Shalom Yasharella.
Shalom.
All right, so Shalom everybody here in Philly. Shalom everybody watching on live stream, and Shalom everyone listening in on teleconference. Welcome to Hashallah Kanas, or the Congregation of Israel, where we teach that the descendants of slaves, as well as the indigenous peoples, make up the southern and northern kingdoms of the 12 tribes of Israel, and that we fall into a lower state politically, economically, even religiously, because we broke the laws of God found the Bible given to us by Moses. And then we come, shalom, and then we come out of this lower state that we fall into by turning back these commandments we broke by following Jesus Christ as our example. And one way we do that is by keeping the new moon holy, which is what we're keeping tonight, the fourth new moon in particular. We're going through some couple new moon scriptures, usually the ones, the usual suspects, as far as what we're familiar with. It'll just be a review. And as you might see in the description and in the title of the video, I'm going to talk about the concept or the idea of risk, and actually see that it's really just tied into discerning between good and evil when it comes to decision making, whether it be for small matters or for great matters, right? So a lot of things you may learn in the world, like when you study public health, or you might study risk management, or study insurance, or what they call actuarial science, right? A lot of these fancier terms are just really terms that really just deal with decision making when it comes to certain things, when it comes to like purchases, when it comes to investments, things like that. It's all about knowing the right way to go, and when it comes to greater matters, the best way to go. Right? So all these different fields really get summed up in that way. But we'll touch on some of the parables of Christ to address those aspects of the formula, which focus on mainly likelihood times consequence, the likelihood of something happening, which you'll see in the bottom, which is how many times something may occur over a period of time, times the consequence, which is how much something's going to cost you if something happens that's going to be, cause some kind of damage, physical damage or property damage or what have you. But that's the basic formula. Everything else kind of builds off of that. But it's already there in the scriptures, as is all wisdom, just a matter of drawing it out. But first, let's get into the new moon scriptures before we touch on that formula. So, my name is Navia Ball. I'll be doing the service today. All praise to the Most High in Christ by way of the Holy Spirit, of course, as usual. And just write down for your notes that according to the Gregorian calendar, it would be June 17th, 2023. But then according to our calendar, it would be the fourth month and the first day, since we're in the new moon. All right, so first, as usual, let's go to Numbers chapter 10 and verse 10. Where we see the beginning of the month being made mention of during the time we were in the wilderness. So this is Numbers chapter 10 and verse 10, which reads, "Also in the day of your gladness and in your solemn days and in the beginnings of your months, ye shall blow with the trumpets over your burnt offerings and over the sacrifice of your peace offerings, that they may be to you for a memorial before your God. I am the Lord your God." So back then, during the time when Moses and Aaron and Miriam were alive, right, during that generation, when we came out of Egypt after 430 years of captivity, and the Most High was instructing Moses to instruct the people on how to keep the law before him and to celebrate the Most High away from Egypt in the wilderness as a sovereign nation, as our own nation. One of the things he told us to do here is what? In the days of our gladness, in our solemn days, and the beginning of our months. So during feast days, and even during the times that we're in right now, which we use to keep the feasts, we use the new moon to tell time of feast, and we're going to read a scripture that deals with that. The beginning of the month, to know when a month starts, to know, okay, what day of the month are we in? Since we know feasts come in during a certain month and during a certain day, at least the majority of them, right? We know one feast in particular is coming up, a major one for, which we're not there yet, but we will get there in a couple days, right? The summer is the Feast of First Fruits. You guys might have saw the more recent email that came out to where, at least according to North America, we see the wheat harvest beginning right into May, beginning of June, just right around the time of that week coming out of May, going into June, so that we would know to count those weeks. So for the next calendar, I was going to send out for 2004 to 2024, 2025, 2025 to 2026. Instead of using the third week of May to begin the count, I'm just going to use the fourth week of May. Just use the last week of May and count that way. Because from looking in the past, which usually is evidence of what we more than likely come to pass in the future. That usually seems to be when the wheat harvest begins. As they say in the scriptures, when the sickle meets the corn, when they begin to harvest wheat. At least in North America, usually in the states of Arkansas and North Carolina, those tend to be the states that usually do it or get there first. But I'll just set the tentative date at that time and adjust as need be. But usually going back in the past, it was always that last week of May, and every so often it might have been the first week of June, which would make the feast being like either in the middle of July or towards the end of July. The key, of course, being that the feast falls in the summertime to know that we are keeping it right. And as we see, even though we're in the land of our captivity, even though we may not be on the field ourselves, we can still use that record to see when the wheat harvest begins, to know when to start counting those weeks. But besides that feast, we know we use the moon to tell when other feasts come in, right? Whether it was the Passover in the springtime, the Tabernacles in the fall, the Feast of First Fruit, the Feast of Dedication in the wintertime, as far as major feasts. But the new moon is a key one to use to understand that and to keep that. Now let's get our forefathers keeping it. Go to 1 Samuel chapter 20. 1 Samuel chapter 20 and verse 5. 1 Samuel 20 and 5. Which reads, and David said unto Jonathan, behold, tomorrow is the new moon, and I shall not fail to sit with the king at meat. But let me go that I might hide myself in the field until the third day at even. So like we always talk about, you go into the story. Saul, who's the king, seeks David's life without a cause. Jonathan's becoming a whip to this. So between David and Jonathan, who are very close, they're making a plan as far as what David should do next, as far as whether he should abide in their household since he was since he was King Saul's armor bearer, or if he should flee. So making a plan for him to stay away for about 3 days. You'll give him a signal as far as what he should do, because it tells you in the scriptures that an evil spirit has tormented Saul, and the Holy Spirit is departing from him. So at that time, the new moon was coming up. It doesn't say which new moon it was. We just know it was around that same time of beginning of the month. But now you jump to verse 24. They're going to act on this plan, which reads, once again, 1 Samuel 20 and 24. So David hid himself in the field. It says, and when the new moon was come, the king sat him down to eat meat. So the king was there to eat meat, as they normally would for this feast. It says, and the king sat upon his seat as at other times, even upon a seat by the wall. So he had a special place where he usually sat. It says, and Jonathan arose, so his son was there. It says, and Abner sat by Saul's side, who was his captain of the host. It says, and David's place was empty, because him and Jonathan made that plan for him to go away for a little while till he could figure out whether or not the coast was clear. 26, it says, nevertheless, Saul spake not anything that day, for he thought something had befallen him. He is not clean. Surely he is not clean. Right? Which we go into laws of uncleanness. Some things can happen to anyone. Some things are specific to men. Some things are specific to women when it comes to uncleanness. Right? Where it's not a wicked thing, it's just the condition of the flesh, where the law goes into what's lawful to do when you become unclean, right? Now, there's laws you can break that can make you unclean for sure, but then there's things that you can't help that are lawful that'll make you unclean too. The key is to abide by the law, and if you become unclean through righteous means or means that aren't wicked, just make sure you apply the law as far as how and when you're supposed to wash yourself with water so that you're clean after a day or 7 days, whatever the duration, the period is. So that's what Saul is thinking, right? Because he sees and knows David to be a righteous man. He says, he's usually here with us for the feast. Maybe he's not clean. Maybe that's why he's not here. But reading on, it says in verse 27, and it came to pass on the morrow, which was the second day of the month, that David's place was empty. And Saul said unto Jonathan his son, wherefore cometh not the son of Jesse to meat neither yesterday nor today? Because they would eat together normally anyway, not just on a high holy day, but not 2 days have gone by and he hasn't come. We already know from reading the story, from the outside looking in, what's going on and what David and Jonathan agreed to. But this is always good to read to show that the beginning of the month and that the new moon are the same, because it says the morrow was the second day of the month, meaning the new moon was the beginning of the month, right? So that's 1 Samuel chapter 20, verse 5, also verses 24 to 27, to read with Numbers 10 and 10. And then we always have, well, we can always go to this psalm as well. Psalms 81, verses 3 and 4, which shows that this was a joyous occasion for Israel to keep, right? For our people to follow, especially when we knew better. Nowadays, we follow all this other stuff that's not according to the law, statutes, and commandments due to our transgression. And due to many of us believing that we're not even Israel, us believing that we're Gentiles or other nations, like the elder was going into during the Sabbath service earlier today, or yesterday since the sunset. So Psalms 81, verses 3 and 4. Psalms 81, verse 3 reads, "Blow up the trumpet in the new moon, in a time appointed on our solemn feast day. For this was a statute for Israel and a law of the power of Jacob." This was a law and a statute that we kept. And by law, it became custom or customary for us to follow this, right? A usual celebration that we don't all know about. So when it comes to the new moon, when it comes to the Sabbath, when it comes to holy days, these are the holy days. These are the solemn days we're supposed to know off the top. Just so you talk to any people that are out there, you can typically ask them if they haven't become too Americanized when it comes to America's so-called holidays. You ask any people about their festivals, their celebrations, they should be able to tell you, okay, well, we do this around this time because of this, that, and the third, right? So you look at other nations, whether it be Elam or Moab or Ammon or Ishmael or different Hamite nations or what have you, they'll have festivals, sometimes even align with the moon, even align with certain seasons, like we do, we do it in righteousness according to the creator of heaven and earth. They do it too, but it's not according to the creator of heaven and earth, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But they will have certain festivals during certain seasons and during certain times of the month. But yeah, they'll be able to tell you about that. But then you ask us, what are you guys about? What are you into? And we usually have something that's just a similitude to something we got from one of the other nations, right? We might take that and then remix it and try to make it our own and say, yeah, this is what we do, right? But then you really go into it, it's like, no, that's just something that we celebrate recently due to our most recent captivity, whether it be at the hands of, whatever flavor of Esau put us in captivity, whether it was the Dutch, the French, the Spanish, the English, right, what have you. And we'll try to create new culture based on our most recent captivity that we undergone. But no, we've got holy days that we kept going back to when we first began to be a people. And these laws are heavy because they even go before we were a people, but the Most High had these laws be specially given to and for us to keep as far as the 12 tribes. Like I said earlier, so-called descendants of slaves and indigenous peoples, right? That's what we typically are called today, according to the modern terms or by modern definition. But we're actually the southern and northern kingdoms of the 12 tribes of Israel, the two sticks that are to be made one very soon. And then we'll get an example real quick too of David's son Solomon keeping it. So let's get this real quick in Second Chronicles chapter 2 and verse 4. Second Chronicles chapter 2 and verse 4, which we'll get eventually as we go through the books of history in the scriptures. We know right now we're in Samuel's, but we'll get through Kings and then we'll get to Chronicles too. So it's going to be a lot of good, interesting history, which, when we really get into it and kind of with our mind's eye and our mind's ear kind of go there and kind of become immersed in the story, it'll be that much more enlightening, that much more engaging. And when you have a story that can go along with what you learn, it makes it easy to remember, easy to identify with. You can easily, or it makes it easier to recall the information, right? Just like you'll see in the world when they teach law, right? They'll have like different laws or statutes that you'll study of different types. But then it gets interesting when you get into what they call case law, where they'll pull up different cases, whatever level it might be, whether it's the federal level, state level, or municipal level, between different parties, and then they'll invoke certain laws to say, yeah, In this case, we apply this law in this situation. So that's what makes it more engaging, where it'll make it easier to remember. Okay, this is why this particular statute is important. Because in the case of so-and-so versus so-and-so, here was the outcome once this law was instituted. So Samuel's Kings and Chronicles are very much like that. We'll kind of see it being like a righteous case law of sorts, where you'll see our ancestors either keeping or breaking the law and what the outcome was afterwards. Which usually tends to be pretty predictable, right? Because when we break the law, usually it's not anything good. When we keep the law, it's usually something good. But Second Chronicles 2 and 4, right? This going into when Solomon dedicated the first temple. He says, "Behold, I build an house to the name of the Lord my God, or Yahweh my power, dedicated to him, and to burn before him sweet incense, and for all the continual showbread, and for the burnt offerings, morning and evening, on the Sabbaths, and on the new moons that we're keeping right now, and on the solemn feast of Yahweh our power. This is an ordinance forever to Israel." So we took what we did in the wilderness, and him and his father, they took it to the next level, where they said, we're to build a temple in a similitude or in a similar fashion as the tabernacle, and praise the Most High through this permanent building now they're going to have set up in the land of Israel, in the city of Jerusalem, where the Most High's eye is. And we're going to keep all the holy feasts unto him there, including the new moon, which we're keeping right now. And we see it being mentioned. So that was Second Chronicles 2 and 4. Now, I like this one because it goes into the future. Isaiah 66 in verse 23. Showing that this isn't something that's going to be dead and gone or over and done with. Like, oh, that's something that the Israelites did back then. Okay, you say we're Israelites now, okay, but we shouldn't do that anymore. There's no need for us to do that anymore. Well, then how do you explain this? Because we're going to have to go to Isaiah. And we don't want to talk bad about Isaiah or any of the Bible, really, because we know Christ comes in the form of the book. But especially Isaiah for so-called Christians, because they love to go here to show prophecies about Christ. And well, they should. But then they want to look at the rest of Isaiah and just kind of cast it behind themselves when you bring it out to them about us coming in the power through Christ, us taking the nations as captives, us rewarding them justice or punishment as justice for the wrongs they did to our people throughout the generations. They want to look past that, and they shouldn't. They should embrace it, as well as the prophecies about Christ as well. So this is towards the end of Isaiah, right before Jeremiah. But Isaiah 66 and 23, it reads, "And it shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another, shall all flesh come to worship before me, saith the Lord." So it says it's going to come to pass. So this is something that hasn't happened yet, meaning it's a future prophecy. From one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another. So in the future, from one new moon to another, which we're going to keep every new moon, just like we're keeping right now. It says from one Sabbath to another, like we keep every seventh day of the week, like we just did today. Shall all flesh come to worship before me, saith the Lord. So it's not just going to be his remnant seeking after him like we see now. This congregation with that congregation waking up, this congregation waking up, right? But no, it's going to be something that's going to be followed by the whole world, the whole wide world. They're all going to know about it. And then we go into the New Testament, we'll also see where Paul will make mention of this as well, as far as us keeping the new moon and this being a thing that's going to be done and going to be known in the future. So now this is Colossians 2. Colossians chapter 2, 16 and 17. Once again, Colossians chapter 2, verse 16 and also verse 17. Verse 16 reads, let no man therefore judge you. So Paul's telling our brothers and sisters in Colossae, don't let any person, any man judge you, it says, in meat or in drink, meaning what you eat and what you drink, meaning what you eat should be lawful, what you drink should be lawful. And if you drink and eat lawfully, that you don't overindulge, where you become a drunken and a glutton, right? A drunkard and a glutton, I should say. So you should know how to eat and how to drink. But then it says, or in respect of an holy day, or of the new moon, like we're keeping tonight, or the Sabbath days, like we just kept before the sun went down. It says in verse 17, which are a shadow of things to come. Just like in Isaiah, we see here in Colossians 2. These are a shadow of things to come, right? To where it's going to be widely known about the Sabbath, widely known about the new moon. The same way in Babylon the Great, also known as America, it's widely known about Easter, widely known about Christmas, widely known about July 4th, widely known about Thanksgiving, etc., right? Everyone knows when these things are. All the nations that come here, right, that pour into Babylon the Great, as was prophesied, as we see happening, you know, they may come from another country with a different set of customs and culture, but don't know about those days, right? It's like that saying that goes back to where America gets her vibe from, which was Rome, right? Which she's like the beast of Rome rehealed. That's the deadly wound that was healed. Read about Revelation. They have that old saying, when in Rome, do as the Romans do, right? So that's where you see America, what? Sporting all these different Roman customs, which we go into those. They go back to Greek customs, which they take their customs from old Hamite customs, right? Worshipping the gods of Ham, the false idols of Ham, right? When you go into their belief systems that they do openly and oftentimes behind closed doors through their mystery religions. So the Most High knows how to call this country out by calling it spiritual Sodom, spiritual Egypt, spiritual Babylon, right? By looking at all the different customs and practices that America upholds. So it's known about those things, but we look forward to the future where the righteous holidays of the Most High will be known, since we'll be that top nation in the earth, pushing that top culture that's only productive, right? That's only constructive and not destructive, not degenerative, like you see with these other customs that these other nations push and promulgate. Let's get this out of the Apocrypha now. Ecclesiasticus 43. Ecclesiasticus chapter 43 in verse 6, which reads, He, when you read above that he is the Most High, made the moon also to serve in her season. That her is the moon. So we talk about masculine and feminine. Yeah, it applies to male and female as far as men and women, but it also can apply to bodies celestial like the sun and the moon. So you look at the sun, you'll see the sun referred to as he, masculine. But you read about the moon, it will refer to the moon as her, feminine, right? That's not a strange thing. You have other things that are abstract that also are either masculine or feminine. The moon being an example of something that's feminine. It's necessarily like a female or a woman or like a female animal or whatnot. It says, in her season for a declaration of times and a sign of the world. So we look up in the sky, we can see what phase of the moon we're in. We have an idea what time of month that we're in, right? And by counting the moons, we can figure out what season that we're in. It says in verse 7, from the moon is a sign of feast, a light that decreaseth in her perfection. So we use the moon to determine when to keep feasts, like we see with the holy day counters that we and other branches of Christ set up and put out there. We use the moon to tell that time, right? But now it says, a light that decreaseth her perfection, talking about when the moon wanes, right? So from the middle of the month to the end of the month, we know that the moon wanes, right? That's what it means when it says decreaseth in her perfection. But she was made perfectly by the Most High to do what she does in the heavens continually, right? There's never a day where the moon, oversteps itself or forgets to go through its phases, just stays a new moon for too long or stays a full moon for too long. No, it knows to go through the cycle the way it's supposed to. It says in verse 8, the month is called after her name, increasing wonderfully in her changing, being an instrument of the armies above, shining in the firmament of heaven. So it says increasing wonderfully in her changing. So from the time they're in right now, going to the full moon of this fourth month, it's going to increase wonderfully in her changing, meaning the light is going to begin to shine from the right side of the moon and go towards the left to where it becomes full again these next couple weeks. Then it says, being an instrument of the armies above, referring to the stars, right? Because you have different hosts, right? You have a host like you have on this level, where a man may have an army. He might be a captain of the host, like a general. But then you have the Most High's host, which are his Elohim, his angels, his messengers. But you also have the host that the Most High created in the second heaven, too, not third heaven, but in the second heaven, which are the stars, right? So we have different hosts. So that armies here is referring to that host that's in the second heaven. So when you look in the sky, you'll see the moon, you'll see the stars up there with the moon. As you read on in verse 9, it says, the beauty of heaven, the glory of the stars, an ornament giving light in the highest places of the Lord. It says in 10, at the commandment of the Holy One, they will stand in their order and never faint in their watches. Right? So that's all of them, right? Not just the moon, but the sun and moon and stars, but they share those last two verses, right? As far as them never fainting in their watches.
But also, when it says they never faint in their watches, if we look at the moon, for example, and when it says it's a sign of the world, so the moon being a sign of the world is indication that the moon, as you were saying earlier, that we will still be keeping the moon, because if it's a sign of the world, it's there to regulate how the world control times, right? It's gonna be there, right? It's the month is called after her name, because we know on Earth we bound by times and space, and the moon serves as the clock that keep going, right? And it will not stop, because the only way the moon will stop doing is circling if it's the Earth were to pretty much dissipate. We don't have the Earth anymore, right? Because the Earth is there and the moon is there as a calendar. Think about how our people would not be able to function and document what's going on in the past and history, this, that, and the third, if they did not have a calendar, right? So that's they mimicking what the Most High set up as a calendar up there. Granted, we may not know the specifics of it, but the Most High said, I put that up there to tell you the time. In the time when we were not wicked, right? Our people were blessed with the gift to tell us what time we were, so that we can actually plant our crops and this and that and the third, right? To observe the instruments that up there, right? So I try to stay away as much as I can with, saying that it's a star, how our people, out there, they say, man, you were in the star. They have, when was the last time we looked up there and you see that they have six points, right? So I would say, the instruments above and different instruments that the Most High created up there, right, for their purpose. But the moon in itself is an instrument, is our calendar that's the Most High set up so that we know what time it is. So that's why they would not be fainted in their changing. As long as the earth exists, that's why it's still gonna be there.
Come. So let's get this. Oh, and in case you guys were wondering, this is in the Hebrew. I was gonna save it to the end, but I gotta tell you now in case you guys aren't sure. This is a Shah, and a Ra, which just means a Shar, and then you have Chadash, which just means moon, or it's understood as new moon. And then we have Rabba, a Ra, Abba, a Ya, a I, and a Ya, a Rabba Yaya, which just means fourth. And then finally, Ya Sha'ala, or Ya Sha'ra'a, and La, Israel. In case that caption, you're looking at it and going, what's that? Right? But since you see here, we're talking about risk, understanding risk when it comes to small matters and great matters, especially when it comes to great matters. What you'll notice is the formula that they give you, right? When you study this, like I said earlier, you have to study it for school or for, if you're studying like public health or studying, insurance or studying, risk management, they usually start you off with this basic idea and everything else kind of builds off from it. But it's actually useful in that it's something that we could use because we see it coincides. It doesn't really go against the scriptures per se, but it coincides with it when it comes to reasoning. When you really sit back and consider all things, and we all scriptures in the balance, right? We know that the Most High ultimately decides everything, even though He's given us free will. So the best that we can do, right, as flesh and blood, as men and women of Israel in particular, is really just better our odds in one way as opposed to the other, right? Our hopes being that things will work out for us, whatever it is that we're trying to do for ourselves, for family, for friends, for associates, right? The scriptures serve as a guideline when it comes to making decisions, small and great, when it comes to small matters, choosing from right and wrong, when it comes to greater matters, choosing better as opposed to just choosing well, right? To make the best choice. But I like these parables that Christ gives us when it comes to looking at how many and how much. But we see with the first part where it says risk equals likelihood. So we're talking about risk. We're talking about likelihood times consequence, which you break it down according to just interrogatives, right? Likelihood of something happening just means how many times something may occur within a given time, right? A very basic example could be something like, you know, how oftentimes, someone may get, into an accident at, when crossing the street or when crossing the street on a red light, how often someone might get into an accident, right? And depending on the study that's being done, they might look at certain things more specifically to try to figure out what that is and to figure out how to avert that or how to, what they might say, mitigate the risk. So when we talk about counting how many, real quick, go to Luke because he kind of covers both of these, how many and how much, which how much is going to come up when we get to consequence, but how many, go to Luke chapter 14. Luke chapter 14. And let's start from verse 28. And be quiet if you could read that, Baba Kushan. Once everybody has it. Luke chapter 14 and verse 28.
Luke 14 and verse 28. For which of you intending to build a tower sitteth not down first and counteth the cost, whether he have sufficient to finish it? Less happily after he have laid the foundation and is not able to finish it. All that behold, it began to mock him, saying, this man began to build and was not able to finish.
Right. So now we look at counting the cost, right? But in this case, when we talk about counting the cost, this is more so focused on resources, right? As far as having enough to hire enough folks to get the job done, right? Doing the calculations as far as the work that's involved and, the resource that'll be needed as far as the raw materials to turn them into that final product, which in this case would be a tower, right? So he asked the question, don't just sit down and count the cost to see if they are sufficient to finish it. What's happened after he had laid the foundation, is not able to finish it, they'll mock him and say, look, this person got started with the job, but then it didn't get done, right? Like we might see that in the neighborhood sometimes as far as you'll see a house, right? Or a side of a house that'll have like, they might have scaffolding set up. They might have like the mesh put against the brick, like they're going to do some stucco work. But then it's just sitting there. You see folks working on it at first, but then all of a sudden the work stops, maybe because this is not necessarily due to the fault of the person doing the work, but maybe the person who lives there or owns the property doesn't want to pay, the amount to get it done. But they won't finish the side of the house to put the stucco on there or the cement mix to make it look nice. You just see that mesh just sitting there, or even the scaffolding sometimes sitting there. The person doesn't, break it down to use for another job. So we'll see that. But there's other things you'll see. Once they get started on it, you blink your eyes, a couple of days or weeks go by, months go by, and that place is up and running, right? Especially these big superstores like these Sam's Clubs, these Walmarts, these Targets. You'll see once they get started on those, they're moving right on to get it completed. This also is echoed in an older proverb. Let's get that real quick. Hold Luke 14. To go to Proverbs real quick. I see how Solomon could talk about this, given the task laid out for him from his father when it came to building the temple. Just through his experience, he gained this wisdom, or could at least observe this wisdom directly. So Proverbs 24 in verse 27. In that Gabar, if you could read that, Baba Kushan.
All right, this is the book of Proverbs 24 and 27. Prepare thy work without, and make it fit for thyself in the field, and afterwards build thy house.
Right. So he says, prepare thy work without, and make it fit for thyself in the field, and afterwards build thine house. So for any job that needs getting done, right? You got to make sure you have all the raw materials that are needed, right? And of course, you need to have people that are either unskilled and skilled, a combination depending on the task that are needed to be completed, to take those raw materials and transform them into a finished product, right? We've got more sophisticated in these modern times with the industrial age, information age, or kind of streamline this process into like an assembly line when it comes to certain procedures. But even that, still that classic hands-on approach to building things hasn't gone away. It's still here. Even though we might have more advanced tools, the process, certain things when it comes to the process of construction are just timeless. So you got to do that first. So it's just like what Christ said here in Luke 14. But let's go back to Luke 14, because not only a matter of resources to fund the operation, but you need the manpower to accomplish things as well. Go back to Luke 14. Let's start from 31. And let's read 32. 31 and 32 back in Luke 14.
Luke 14, verse 31. Or what king going to make war against another king sitteth not down first and consulteth whether he be able with 10,000 to meet him that cometh against him with 20,000? Or else, while the other is yet a great way off, he sendeth an ambassage in desire of condition of peace.
Right. It's like an ambassador
or envoy.
Right. Right. Like ambassadors, I guess they do the act of the ambassage. That's what they do. Right. To sit down, like you said, an envoy to break bread. So it's a wise thing Christ is talking about here, where they're saying, okay, I got this much manpower, but then this person might have twice the amount of men that I have, right? And even if we don't take into, the training and the discipline of the soldiers and their vigor and their will to fight, even those things aside, maybe even though they may have outnumbered me, even though we might be able to meet them in battle, it might be best to sit down and say, let's try to work something out, right? Like certain countries might say, you know what, instead of me try to go to war with a stronger force, let me just try to figure out what they want so that neither one of us lose men. Maybe we can find some kind of solution, right? Maybe we can break off what we have for them, and then we can exchange something for them also, right? What are they interested in? What's their leadership interested in? So once again, how much as far as resources, how much as far as manpower, what you could call the human resource, being considered here, right? In this particular similitude that Christ is talking about here. So this is dealing with like what we call consequence, right? In other words, how much is going to cost if, say, like we're talking about the risk of a car getting into an accident or a car causing damage, right? That's how much it's going to cost as far as not only the car itself breaking down and it, maybe exploding, God forbid, or the harm may cause to people and property, right? These are things that they want to consider when they construct these things before they just put them out there. Otherwise, what they'll do is what they call like a recall. They'll say, all right, if this is causing too much damage, this is causing too much hurt to people, maybe we need to go back to the drawing board and bring this thing in. But the whole idea is to test that first, because every year they're coming out with different models for certain cars. The idea is to test out the latest model, what they have first, make sure everything is tip top and in shape. That's where you probably saw more of this like in the 90s, this whole crash test dummies, and you had that commercial about buckling the belt, and you had those guys dancing, right, that had the the little yellow dots on their face. But this is what the company's supposed to do before they actually release this thing into the public, so that they're not causing harm to folks if they get into an accident and the people are suing the company, right? To where ultimately it should be in the company's interest to not want to harm people, to actually solve a problem for people. But we know when it comes to human nature, really, it's the fear of punishment that'll really motivate folks a lot of times to do their job and do it well, so it's not causing other folks harm. But now, Oh, that's what I'm missing. When. So we talked about likelihood being how many times something happens over a certain period of time. When in of itself is just good to always know as far as when to act, when not to act. We look at Ecclesiastes, the third chapter, uh, as a whole. We get a good insight into knowing when and why asking when is important when it comes to certain things. And it's really central when we look at even the modern day things like looking at data, looking at statistics. You always want to have timestamps when it comes to events that you're tracking as far as data goes, right? That's what you'll see in certain records on a spreadsheet or records on a database. You'll always see like a timestamp to know when something happened. Or like very basic examples, like when you have like a receipt for doing a transaction for buying a product or a service from someone, you'll see that timestamp on there as far as when you got this done. Let's get that real quick in Ecclesiastes, and then I'll get a parable real quick where Christ talks about the importance of asking when, but on a more spiritual level. First, let's go to Ecclesiastes chapter 3. And if you could read this, Baba Kushan. Start from verse 1.
This is the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 3, and verse 1. To everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heaven.
Right, so that verse itself is kind of a synopsis. As you go down, we'll get some different examples of some opposing or some opposites set side by side, just to give you a better idea of what he means by what he said in the first verse. So read on.
A time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up that which is planted.
Right. So a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up that which was planted. I think we were talking about that earlier, right, Kahan, as far as the third or fourth generation when we come back, right? And what that means, even when it comes to us ourselves coming back, even though we may not remember, right? And that judgment that follows a family, follows a nation based on their choices each generation. If they choose to do right or wrong. And then the same thing with the planting. We look at the new moon to look and to know, okay, during this season, we know to plant these things, right? In the spring, we plant this. In the summer, we plant this. In the fall, we plant these things and then reap up these things, right? Mostly in the fall, it's reaping. And then when the winter comes in, it's sowing for the next harvest coming up in the spring.
Right. As you bringing that out, a follow up to Luke 14, verse 31 to 32. In addition to that is when people sit down and counted the inventor or project, whatever they're gonna do, how much it's gonna cost. Now, even though they may figure out how much it's gonna cost, now they gotta decide, is it even worth it to go into that project? Even though they might have the resources, what is it worth? What is the benefit of finishing that project to begin with? What am I gonna get out of it? And that's pretty much what Yahushua was also trying to get into, right? If you're gonna follow me, then you gotta count the cost, right? Is it really worth it? And you see that in Matthew 19 and 27, Peter did exactly that. He asked Yahushua, we leave everything to follow you, then what do we get in return? Right? So we're gonna leave everything to follow you, then what is it that we're gonna get?
Come.
And you can write down Matthew 19:27 when Peter asked Yahushua that question. Yeah, we can have everything, but now he says in the follow-up scripture in Luke 14 and 33, he tells him likewise, if you're gonna follow me, then you gotta know, you gotta detach yourself from everything. It costs you to detach yourself from everything. That's what it's gonna cost. Anything that you have in the world that you have as possession, detach yourself from it. That's what it's gonna cost. And what are you gonna get in return? Then you're gonna get eternal life in return. If so, you believe that, because nobody has seen eternal life before. Now that's where the faith comes in.
Come. Exactly. Great risk for great reward, right?
Yep.
That was Matthew, what again?
Matthew 19:27.
Got it. To link with Luke 14:33. All right. And you can read on in verse 3. Goodbye. Baba Kushan.
Verse 3. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to break down and a time to build up.
Right. So a time to kill and a time to heal. Right. So we talk about in judgment and justice. Right. And then we had this discussion, like not this weekend, but the weekend before, about because remember the brother came to the camp and he was saying, hey, you guys are like different from those other brothers up the street. You know, like I would feel some kind of way being approached by them, you know, yelling or barking at me or what have you. But you guys, I can deal with y'all. And then we had to kind of tell them, well, you know, when we fish, you know, we have to use different types of bait, right? Like everybody may not get the indirect approach that we may use at this juncture, right? But we're still gonna get to the same outcome, which is you knowing who you are as a person and that we're under a contract with the Most High for breaking His law. We're still gonna get to that same place. Now, that may work for you, but another person, they might need that more in your face, you know, yes, drill sergeant approach to get their attention. And then we quoted was it Jude 22 and verse 22 and verse 23, where you see in that book, Jude mentions those two examples where he says of some have compassion making a difference, which is the more indirect approach. Then it says in verse 23, and some say with fire, hating even the garment spotted by the flesh, right? So some folks, you got to put the fear of God, the fear of God into them, really get in their world, right? Sometimes with the same person, you might have to use one or the other given the situation, right? And the Most High will even use one or the other for that person, even on an individual level, as far as how He may prove that brother or that sister, things they'll have him or her go through. Or sometimes the Most High might be more compassionate in one area, whereas other ones, the Most High will be right up on you because you didn't say or do this, right? Or He wants you to get to that next level. He wants to perfect you. He wants you to become better. But yeah, I'm just making a reference to Jude verses 22 and 23 because Jude is only one chapter. So technically it's Jude chapter 1, verse 22 and 23. But I'm thinking about that based on what we read here as far as the time to kill and the time to heal. Because we know right now we're in a time to heal since Christ has made His second coming. So since we have a chance at salvation, and like we always talk about, if Christ isn't back yet, we know that what? No matter where we're at in this walk, we're just coming to the truth. If we've been the truth and then we fell off and then we're feeling some kind of way about getting back on how we used to be in the truth. If Christ isn't back yet, we've got a chance to get it right. And you need not take it for granted. Right? We're still in that time to heal. But then when Christ makes a second coming, whenever that day may be, whenever that day may be, emphasis on when, because that's the whole reason why we're talking about this. Right? Whenever that happens, we need to be ready, right? To where if it would have happened, you know, before the sun came up in the morning, we could say, you know what? Of all the days that I've had knowing the truth, I tried my best to be the best at it and put my best foot forward for my brothers and sisters, for my family, for my friends, for my associates, to the best of my ability. Even in shortcomings, you know, you gave it your best. And you know, you can feel confident in that you're going to be given that chance by Christ and be considered for, you know, even if not the varsity team, even for junior varsity, right? As long as you make the team, right? That's what's key. Because we know some of us might make junior varsity, some of us might make varsity, but the whole key is making the team. You want your name to be on that team when you see tryouts, right? This is tryouts right now. You want to make sure when they post that list, that you're on that list. A time to break down, a time to build up. We're reading about that in Esdras, right? Which is a time to build up. A time to break down was what we're going to get to in Chronicles, which also is talked about in Jeremiah and Ezekiel, which is the destruction of Jerusalem due to our transgression, right? Read on in verse 4.
A time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance.
Right. So a time for weeping and a time for laughing, a time for mourning and a time to dance. Right. So it's always good to put things in perspective when it comes to uh, times to reflect and to mourn, but also times to be rejoiceful and happy. Right. Not to lean onto one too much. Right. They're both there for a reason to balance each other out. And we want to give place to both because life just full of much good cheer and joy. You can lose perspective that way. You can lose what's the word, yeah, I guess you could say perspective. Whereas living a life where you're always mourning, always in the dumps, that can lead to bitterness too, to where now you might say or do something against the Lord and make your situation even worse. This makes you think of this verse real quick. Hold this and get to Ecclesiastes chapter 7. Ecclesiastes chapter 7. Start from verse 2 and then read down to verse 4. And then Gabar can read that since you're in Ecclesiastes already.
We should start 7 and 2.
Yep. Hold 3 because we're going to go back there.
All right, this book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 7 and verse 2. It is better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting.
Right. So now it says it's better to go to the house of mourning than to the house of feasting. So while there's a time for both, here it mentions the house of mourning being better, right? When we talk about when it comes to small matters, there's right and wrong. When it comes to great matters, it's doing well versus doing better. So it mentions here it's better the house of mourning than the house of feasting, right? Why? Let's see why it says.
Verse 3. Sorrow is better than laughter.
No, read the rest of verse 2.
Oh,
Mhm.
For that is the end of all men, and the living will lay it to his heart.
So that's the reason why Solomon explains, right? Because it's the end of all men, right? We know we strive for righteousness. We look for that resurrection, just like Christ got resurrected in the future. We know that we all will have our last day, right? Or our last days. Some of us may get to see Christ come back in our lifetime. Some of us may die before that time, right? But all in all, we want to make sure that whichever group that we're in, we want to be righteous for all the days the Most High gives us, right? And for others to look at it and to consider it, to say, yeah, you know what? Shit, I'm not going to be here forever. Let me make sure that I don't take these days for granted, take these weeks and months and years for granted that I have, right? To do the best, to be the best that whatever the Most High has blessed me with. But, it can be easy to become complacent and just think that, I have plenty of days to do this or plenty of time to do that when you're constantly feasting, right? You're constantly having a good time. That can be overlooked. Read on in verse 3.
Sorrow is better than laughter, for by the sadness of the countenance, the heart is made better.
Right. So more emphasis on what we read in 2. Sorrow being better than laughter. Not to say laughter is bad, it's just saying that sorrow is better. And he explains again, for by the sadness of the countenance, the heart is made better. Right? Because once again, when you're in mourning, when you're sad, is usually something that's happened, right? So, I mean, usually it's outside of your control. Sometimes it's within one's control. Sometimes it's directly tied to one's own decisions, or it's tied to decisions of groups of people or even entire nations when it comes to outcomes that are happening. We can even see that now with the signs that we're seeing come to pass that Christ told the disciples: famines, pestilences, earthquakes in diverse places, false Christs, right, et cetera, et cetera. Right? These things are making the heart better for those that see these things and take heed and go, man, this horrible stuff that's happening in the earth. We need not take this thing lightly. There's a deeper reason behind why these things are going down. Let me make sure that when I see these things happen, that I just don't see it and don't really take heart to it. And then read 4, verse 4, and then we'll jump down.
The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of mirth.
Right. Just echoing verses 2 and 3 again about their heart or their mind is going to be considering mourning or serious things, right? But it says the heart of fools is going to be constantly in the house of mirth, which just means joy or happiness, right? To where if anything bad does come to pass or happen, or any misfortune does take place, which again always happen, the fool is usually caught off guard and they're just like, oh man, what's going on? What's up with the good time? When are we going to get back to the good times? Whereas the wise person who's thinking about mourning and thinking about hardship, when the good times come, that wise person will be much more appreciative and can be a lot more happier because he's considered bad for himself and for others. And he knows that this is very precious. This is something that's not to be taken lightly. There's they kind of turn into a meme, but there's a certain character. If you guys, I'm not sure if any of you guys watch anime, but there's this anime called Demon Hunter, and there's a certain character. I think I forget what season it is, but I think it's in season 2, named Sengoku. This guy has orangish hair, like looks like fire. And there's a scene where he's eating food when they're on a train, and he's like extra enthusiastic, and he's like eating it, and he's saying, "Oh, how tasty it is, and how delightful it is," right? And looking at him, you might say, "What's going on? This person looks kind of strange. Why are they?" It's like they're overdoing it when they eat this food and saying how delicious it is. But they kind of go into, as you go watch the story a little further, it goes into why he's doing that. It's because these people who are these quote unquote demon hunters, they don't know when they might come across these demons who are vicious and a lot more powerful than humans, at least in the setting of the show. And they just don't know how many days they may have. So it's like the whole concept of the whole idea of like savoring everything that you can enjoy in this life when it comes to what you may eat or what you may drink or what pleasure you may take in this life. As I'm looking at this, again, it really just reminded me where I read in Ecclesiastes that Solomon talks about through and through, throughout this book. But for those that have seen that, you probably know what I mean. But jump down real quick before we go back to Ecclesiastes 3, and I'll read 14 because it's going to talk about the same thing.
In the day of prosperity, be joyful, but in the day of adversity, consider God also.
Consider. That's like a verb. Consider. Not consider God, consider.
Oh, okay, let's do that again.
Mm-hmm.
In the day of prosperity, be joyful, but in the day of adversity, consider. God also has set the one over against the other, to the end that man shall find nothing after him.
So there it is. That's what we're reading in chapter 3, right? You have the opposites paired with each other so that you can appreciate both sides of the fence, right? How the one justifies the other, right? And there's other verses, even in Ecclesiastes, that talk about that, how the Most High made things in opposites. But yeah, it's pretty much the theme that we're getting at here. But yeah, this verse kind of captures it all when we talk about good day versus bad.
What is that 14 say?
In the day of prosperity, be joyful.
7:14 of Ecclesiastes.
Yeah, chapter 7 to 14. Yeah. You were asking for the verse or?
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah, chapter 7, verse 14. Come. Now I'm thinking about that. What was that show back in the Happy Days? We had in the intro, "Goodbye, gray skies, hello blue." They used to always say that, right, in the beginning. But the whole thing is, we have to be mindful, you know, of the gray skies, so that when the blue skies come, the happy days come, we can appreciate the happy days, right? They both are there for a reason. I think you had your hand up too, right? Oh no.
Right. I had a scripture that I want to pull to link Ecclesiastes 3 and 1. It's Ecclesiastes 8 and verse 6. Because as we reading this right here, Solomon is putting everything in balance, his experience in a philosophical way, the way he see things, the way he understood things, right? And then he's putting that based on his experience and his philosophy, and see that everything that man is at the end of the day, right? As we know the conclusion, what he said on it, like the Most High never revealed everything to anyone. So he set everything one over another. No man can tell you what's gonna happen tomorrow. What course of action you need to take, because this is exactly what's gonna happen tomorrow.
Right.
No man can tell you that. And he did that for a purpose, that people keep the fear in him, because nobody really know what's gonna happen tomorrow. So and then he set it up that way. But let me read it real quick in Ecclesiastes 8 and verse 6. Because to every purpose there is a time and judgment, therefore the misery of men is great upon him. So now it kind of keep you off balance, because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So everyone is off balance. Keep you off balance, where if you think it's a good day, don't bank on the good days. Keep on the lookout. If it's a bad time, you'll try to fix yourself. So you don't know what's going to happen. So you always keep you on your toes.
Come. Read verse 7 too, Baba Washan.
7. For he knoweth not that which shall be, for who can tell him when it shall be? So no one can tell you when something is going to happen exactly to a T. Not even Yahushua himself can tell you what day he's coming. Only the Most High knows that. Just to show you the difference.
It's funny you mentioned that. We're going to get that after we finish in Ecclesiastes, before we close out. That same parable, right? Right before he gives that parable, he says exactly what you just said. To link with that, if you could, read Proverbs 27 and 1 as well. Because this is central to risk, but from a scriptural standpoint, right? Because usually when it comes to the world, it's just percentages, dollar signs, histograms, charts, right? When we look at different statistics for certain things, which is all well and good, but just always be mindful of the wisdom that we can gain from that, which is what we're talking about right now, right? The best we can do is just mitigate risk the best we can. Right? Build favor with the Most High the best we can when things are well, so that when the rough patches do come, we at least have some kind of shade from the heat.
Right. And also, no matter how righteous any one of us is doing right now, don't bet on it and be slack in thinking that you made it. Mm-hmm. It's like, keep going, because tomorrow something might come along and take you and you out. Yeah. Right? So don't think you made it or you saved right? And say, man, I'm righteous, man. I'm doing everything that I'm supposed to be doing, man. Everything is good. Oh man, I made it. Nah, just hope tomorrow you continue to keep the law. Because at any time anything can happen, and then so that's why everybody got to be on their toes.
Yeah, it's facts. You got Proverbs 27.
Proverbs 27.
Mm-hmm.
27 and
1. To echo those sentiments.
Proverbs 27 and 1. Boast not thyself of tomorrow, for thou knowest not what a day may bring forth.
That's it. Straightforward, right? It says what it's saying.
Right. And that's why some people, they cannot deal with the fact that they don't know what's going to happen. They seek wizards, and they seek magic, or they seek black magics, so that they can have a hand on the future. Right? So, and it's tempting because some of them do get result, and that's when they become snared. Right? Because that fact right there, the Most High said, no one knows. And if anybody tells you what's going to happen tomorrow and you see it happen, you better watch out.
Yeah. Yeah. Because then they'll be looking at you with their Bible going, could you get that from your God? Look what I got from my God over here, or from my source. You guys didn't, your God came up short. Yeah, I'll pass on that. It's just like, didn't you read about Daniel and all the astrologers and the stargazers?
Right.
Didn't you not read about Joseph? You know, like these guys were in their own a class, a league of their own, beyond all these sorcerers and magicians of their time. You fall into those same traps in 2023. I think we all can think about a certain brother at camp, right? That this is kind of his dilemma, right? That we see coming to camp constantly.
Right. And the best thing that we can have, as far as the future, is the past history. That's the best thing we can have. I mean, even though history is not predictive, at least it gives you a view of what you can expect,
Right.
but not the exact thing.
Right.
You can get an expectation based on our past. That's why the Most High said, go back to our history and inquire of the former age, right? So that you can move forward. The further we look back in our history, the further we can go forward and have an expectation what we can get in the future. But don't bet on exactly, thinking that you made it.
Khan. The verse that Khan's referring to for folks watching, Job 8 and 8, where it says, inquire, pray thee of the former age, prepare ourselves for the search of our fathers. I'll quote someone in the world, Mark Twain, right? Famous, author, right? At least as far as America's concerned. I think this quote is credited to him, where he says, history doesn't repeat, but it sure does rhyme.
Right.
So it's like a way of like frame what you just said, where it doesn't repeat exactly, but it can rhyme. So it sounds like the previous verse, but it's not exactly the same verse, Because you use, prose and poetry as a way to like talk about events past and present.
Right. And that's why sometimes the world doesn't want us to go back to our history to see what happened, so that we can, know who we are and know where we mess up. Mm-hmm. And then, you know what? We mess up that way. The Most High said, do this, and we didn't do it. He said, man, you ain't got to do that. You ain't got to go back to your head. That was back then. Don't do that. Mm-hmm. Because if you dig deep enough, you find your history, then you can have a better outlook on what the future gonna look like. Again, it's not exactly on an individual level how it's gonna look, how it's gonna be, but as a nation, you know where we're gonna be in the future.
Come. So don't be taken back, folks, by all these fancy terms and words they use, histograms and predictive analytics, it's all dealing with the same stuff, what we're talking about now, using past history to predict the likelihood of future events, right? That's what we're talking about when we talk about risk management, risk assessment, right? It's not really a new concept. It just may be explained with different terms, different words, using different tools to do the same process, but the goal has always been the same. Chapter 3 again. We had a couple more there before we go back. I think Gabar was reading for us. We left off in time to mourn and time to dance, and now I think we're in 3 and 5. We're going to stop in 8.
We're at 5, right?
Mm-hmm.
A time to cast away stones, and a time to gather stones together. A time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing.
Right. So a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together. Right. Now this one, we can look at this specifically when it comes to the law, right? When we make an altar, right? I can think about this verse when we read about the feast of the rededication of the altar, right? The feast dedication goes into this, right? As far as us against the Greeks, and then the sons of Mattathias and those helping them coming together to rebuild the altar that was destroyed, right? A central device that was part of the temple, the tabernacle, and then the temple later, as far as a way of communing with the Most High, right? With the priests being the arbiters of that, the arbiters of that transaction that the people would have with the Most High, right? With our offerings. And then those stones being defiled, and then them having to gather clean stones, right, that weren't defiled. And this is a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, right? Right. We can see this too when it comes to different things, different sufferings, different troubles, different traumas we may have gone through, different afflictions we may have gone through, to where, depending on when the affliction, how the affliction happens, the person, how they are, right, in their situation when they're being afflicted, be it physical affliction, proprietary affliction as far as their possessions, or personal, affliction when it comes to family and friends going through similar things. It's key to know when to do this, one or the other. The second precept of verse 5. So this is definitely a key one when it comes to affliction. Like we look at Job and how he was afflicted in all 3 ways, right? Physical, proprietary, personal, and how he dealt and how he was dealt with, right? How he dealt with his wife, how he dealt with his friends, right? How his wife and friends dealt with him, given these horrible things happening to him. Because we know how it is. Sometimes, depending on the situation, depending on the person, you may not have to say anything. It's just a matter of just being there, or just being a listening ear. Other times, it might be a thing where, depending on the person, it's just like they just need that alone time, right? To go for that walk, to go, away for a little while to kind of gather their thoughts, clear their mind, right?
And in verse 5 also, the embracing thing is also going into embracing your wife or whatever, time to lay with your wife and a time to not lay with your wife. All that is part of it, and we come to embrace.
Oh yeah, come. Yeah, I guess what I'm talking about kind of includes that. Yeah. So, verse 6.
A time to get and a time to lose. A time to keep and a time to cast away.
Right. So kind of going into the whole risk part, right? When we talk about investing, right? We talk about financial stuff, which I know Khan, that's his thing. You could probably think on this one, right, and speak to this one when it comes to how certain folks, when it comes to them, making certain investments, is one thing when it comes to, hoarding, right, what you have. There's another thing when you say, okay, you've acquired a certain amount, but then you use that to create opportunity instead of just hoarding the wealth that opportunity gave you, right? And for a lot that are in the world that may be good at this thing, right? The good at acquiring the mammon of unrighteousness, as Christ calls it, they may lean more to the other side where they have the mammon of unrighteousness, right? They have that skill, but then they don't know how to take that and actually create opportunity with it. Or they may know how, but are reluctant to do so. And they just hoard and they just keep it up for themselves instead of like using it to actually create another opportunity for more growth.
Right.
And there's other scriptures in Ecclesiastes where Solomon goes into that as well, and how that can have the opposite effect,
right,
of what you desire, by you hoarding what you have gotten.
Right. And it goes to the same thing about everything in twos, right? Sometimes you're gonna lose, right? Sometimes you're gonna gain.
Mm-hmm.
Some people like to, if people are accustomed to always winning, when the time to lose come in, you lose something, you're gonna lose your head. You gotta understand that you lose sometimes, you gotta cut your losses because it was a time to lose. You're not always gonna win.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you're gonna lose. A time to lose, a time to win. A time to save money, and a time to spend money. Right? Because it's time to spend money. Sometimes like you said, you hold the money for too long. Now the opportunity to spend money come in, you don't even know. So you got to balance life out. A time to spend, a time to economize, economize, to make some economy. So everything works in twos. At the end of the day, you can't take anything with you to begin with, right? But everything works in twos.
Yeah, come.
Like Esau, for example, he don't understand these laws of time to lose. He wants to win all the time. That's why when he lose, when the time to lose come in, he doesn't know how to handle it, because he always want to win. Everything is, I gotta keep getting in. So he doesn't buy. But with us, we know how to have it, how to don't have anything, and then if we balance it out with the wisdom that the Most High give us, that's why he cannot understand us, because we could be in the ghetto. And then we have the opportunity, then we rise up, right? He doesn't know how to handle that. But if he always constantly win, always me, I gotta win, he jump off the building when he lose.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. What did he say back in the day, his forefather? I am at the point to die. What's his birthright doing to me? I'm so hungry. It's just like, I know you're hungry, but are you that hungry to give up that which matters most? This too will pass. But it was like in the moment, for Esau, it was just like, oh, they got to eat. Right. So we see that with his forefather.
Right. It's like not being able to control the hunger, and the hunger take power over him. So he didn't care about his birthright, because nothing means anything to him at that point in time, but to control that hunger. Once he control that hunger, then he's okay. So the birthright, which is matter most, he didn't care about that.
It's like that thing they say about when they talk about advertising and like shopping. They say like if you have an urge to like get something online, you see an ad or something, or you get like a pop-up and you go, oh, I want to get this. And it's like you sit back and you consider, okay, is this something that I want or something that I need? And nothing wrong with getting things you want, but then they say if it's something that you really had to get, you wait a certain period of time. I'm not sure how long it is, but maybe like 15 minutes, like a half hour.
Right, delayed gratification.
And it's like if you don't have to get it, you realize, oh, I really didn't need that. And you realize, okay, that was just a spur of the moment. That was just the itch, I just needed to scratch. I just needed to kind of let run its course. There's a lot of folks that'll make big purchases like that just on the whim, and then sometimes you have people make like little small purchases back to back to back on a whim, same way. And in their mind, so it's just a little small purchase, but those little small purchases here, and here end up adding up. So it's like in those grand moments and those little small moments, they can all add to something where it's like it can get you somewhere you may not want to be. You're like, oh man, I bought all this and I really didn't need it. So yeah, it's the thing that really makes it interesting is that when it comes to these greater matters, the Most High doesn't make it just like a black and white thing. Like when we're younger, it's easier when we're learning about the basics. It's like, okay, this is just right and wrong versus, okay, what's the best way to go here? What's the best option, right? That's where things can get a little more hazy, a little more gray, getting to that more of a gray area, more convoluted. We might have to do a little more work, a little more assessment to go, okay, yeah, given the time, the situation that I'm in, this is the best route to go, right? When you ask those W's that we always talk about when we interrogate, when might be more important than how. Sometimes how you do something may be more important than what you're doing. Sometimes what is more important than where. So it's like they all matter, but given the situation, sometimes you may pay a little bit more, which is how much, but because where something is, it's close to your proximity versus something that you might want to get a product or service that might be far away, right? Which is like, okay, the time and the resource going to take me to get here to get the better price. In the end, when I do the arithmetic, is it worth it? Actually, it's not. And actually, I have a necessity to get it now, even though I might pay a little bit more, but it's closer to me. Sometimes it might be a better route to go the distance and get that product or service that may be out of state or a little bit further away, because the gas and the time that takes you to get there, we're still not being. When you add that to the deal you're getting, it still will be a deal compared to getting something that's closer to you, right? So weighing those W's in the balance and saying, okay, what's the best option in these greater matters? And as far as the world goes, greater matters are just like we're talking about purchases, and more specifically when it comes to bigger decisions, that's like we're talking about what job to take, or what insurance plan to go with, or what house to get, or what car to get, right? And like you were saying earlier, Khan, why am I getting this house? Why am I getting this car? Why am I getting this job? That's part of the equation too. It's going to help you out with deciding which one to go with, because your why will oftentimes it's kind of like a linchpin, might determine where a job is that'll be convenient, how much a job pays that'll be convenient, what a job entails that'll be convenient for you in that given situation. But we're talking hypotheticals, but that's the idea. Maybe we can go into some scenarios during the week for those different things if you guys like. But where did he leave off? Oh, he went out there. So I guess I can have you pick up, because I think we left off in verse 6. Before we read verse 6, you had your hand up.
No.
So let's read on in verse 6. Verse 7. You already discussed verse 6 about the time to get and the time to lose.
A time to rend. And
Actually, Salaki, before you go there, if you could, hopefully this won't be too much of a dig, because Ecclesiastes, it's like all the wisdom books, just reading a verse, it'll always go to something else and it kind of dip into something else. But let's go there. Go to chapter 11 real quick, just on what we're talking about. As far as a time to get and a time to lose.
right?
So link this with Ecclesiastes 3 and 6. Ecclesiastes 11, we're going to read down this 1 to 6.
Ecclesiastes 11, verse 1.
Mm-hmm.
Cast thy bread upon the waters, for thou shalt find it after many days.
Right. So it says, cast thy bread upon the waters, for thou shalt find it after many days. Right. So it's like putting something out at sea. Right. Could be, bread, literal bread, could be like a bottle or something that you may have. But what this idea is going into just a physical example of what can happen when you put things out there, right? When you, like we're talking about, not just hoarding your strength or hoarding whatever you gain through opportunity, you use what you gained to create more opportunity, not just sit on what you gained. And it comes back. But as you read on in the verses down, it'll go into more detail. But before we do, yeah.
It says, cast thy bread upon the waters, for thou shalt find it after many days. Give a portion to 7 and also to 8, for thou knowest not what evil shall be upon the earth.
Right. It's like we were talking about earlier. What you have and what you have in excess, be mindful of it, right? And don't just seal it because you may have come out of a tight spot, which can be tough to do, especially if you've been in a tight spot for a while. The minute you get excess, it's like, let me hold on to that for sure, right? Not being reminded of the fact that it's the Most High that abased you, just like He abounded you at this point. Read on.
Verse 3. If the clouds be full of rain, they empty themselves upon the earth, and if the tree fall towards the south or towards the north, in a place where the tree falleth, there it shall be.
Makes you think of what people say. There's if a tree falls down and no one's there to hear, does it make a sound? People ask those like little hypothetical questions. Makes you think of that when I read that verse. He's just using things in nature to kind of get you to consider the affairs of man and how we deal with each other, right?
Right,
because even the things in nature reciprocate, right? If rain falls, it'll fall down into the earth and then feed the grass, right, and cause the vegetation, right? If a tree falls down, wherever it fell, there it shall be. The earth will bear it up. So it's going into how even in nature things are supportive of one another, right? To where you trying to hoard things in your mind, it's like it's not really helping. If anything, you keeping that exchange going, and you are willing to do that, and you're willing to see the benefit for others' sakes, when that comes back around, right, for you, it won't be a thing of like, oh yeah, I was given so that I could get back. It's like a nice delight when things come back around. And sometimes it might be something that you miss and not even catch it. Like what was it with Tobit? When he was being afflicted with that blindness, and how someone gave him, I think, like a goat, like as a gift. Remember he was saying, Edna, I think his wife Edna, he was saying, Edna, we have to get rid of that goat. We can't take anything stolen. And Edna had to like calm him down and say, Tobit, like think, your works are known. You've done plenty of good throughout your life. I know we're in a tough spot right now with this blindness, but this was just a gift that people want to give to you, But he didn't really see it right away. He thought it was like a mistake. Like it wasn't part of a even transaction. He wanted to make sure the book was right. So like his initial instinct was right, but he didn't really look at it from a broader standpoint. He didn't really see the big picture in the moment. That's where Edna came in and say, wait a minute, think about it. Think about all the good you've done for the people and not throwing this captivity under the Assyrians. This is like a gift from God to kind of get you through the days. Of course, the most sad, was going to have Azariah, also known as the brother actually is Raphael, heal his sight anyway. But it was like something to kind of, ease that affliction he was going through with that blindness. That's a tough deal, and he still stuck it through. Because think about other men or women, right? You going out there and burn your brothers and sisters, right? That the Assyrians just left out there, right? Then you give them a proper burial. You're putting your own life on the line, right? Trying to give your brothers and sisters a proper burial. You get home being unclean after, a long day's work, and you fall asleep, and then Mosai has some bird just crap in your eyes, like other person be like, well, I'm doing all this work for the Lord. And Mosai had this happen to me, and now I'm blind. Who's the Lord? They get, like you were saying, they get caught in the zone, they get tempted, and they're back in the world. But Tobit didn't do that. So I'm just kind of making a bigger point. But the main thing I was just trying to get at, in case I lost you guys, was just the whole thing about how things come around.
Right. And also, as we were reading in verse 11, it comes down to that right here. It resonates where it tells from the beginning of verse 1 and in all the way to 4, overanalyzing. Don't overanalyzing anything as long as you are making the right judgment. If the right judgment, just keep making right decision. Just keep making the right decision. Don't worry about what you're gonna get in return. Because when you make the right decision, you may not get it today. Tomorrow, you're gonna get it back, because that's the way Moses set things up. You do good, you get good. You do bad, you get bad. Whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. Yeah. As long as we go with that mindset, don't overanalyze everything. Every little thing, that as long as the decision is based on scripture, you're making a decision, don't worry about it. Keep doing good. Keep doing it, but don't worry about what you're gonna get. Because the Most High already set up the laws where you're gonna get good if you do good. Right? Come. In verse 3, if the cloud be full of rain, they empty themselves upon the earth. And if the cloud is full of rain, the cloud ain't gotta think, man, I gotta rain now. It just come pour down. Automatically you see the cloud say, man, it's gonna rain. And the rain can stop it because it's automatic. So be automatic the same way as you're doing good. Don't think too much of it. Don't overanalyze. Well, verse 4, he that observeth the wind shall not sow. Again, it says with the tree, whether the tree fall on the north side or on the south side, is gonna stay right there. There's nothing else it can do, because that's the course of nature. Right. You don't have leg to walk. That's the way it is. Right. In verse 4, he that observeth the wind shall not sow, and he that regardeth the cloud shall not reap. So if you said, man, it's gonna rain today, I ain't gonna go to work. No, go to work or do something or plant something, because whether or not the rain come and ravish everything, you still gotta plant. Otherwise, people ain't gonna eat. Just keep doing what you gotta do. Don't worry too much. Don't overanalyze and this. Oh man, I wonder, man, I gotta do this, man. You gotta think. No, you know you're doing good. You're doing right. You're doing making the right based on scripture to the best of your ability. Keep doing it.
A little folding of hands, right?
Yeah.
Oh man, look at that. Oh.
So yeah,
he's in your hammock, he's looking at. Oh wow. Looking at the wind. Gone with the wind.
Right. He that regardeth the cloud shall not reap. You don't have control over the cloud. The cloud gonna do what it's gonna do. Right. And your job is to plant, just plant.
Read on in verse 5.
5. As thou knowest not what is the way of the spirit, nor how the bones do grow in the womb, or of her that is with child. Even so, thou knowest not the works of God, who maketh all. So you don't know, you don't have control over it. And you have scientists trying to explain this, trying to explain that, and then we got caught up in it too, and we forget that the Most High has control over all these things, right? Don't worry too much about all these things.
11 and 5. Now we're in 6.
Of what?
11 and 5, I said. Yeah. Now we're in Ecclesiastes 11 and 6.
All right.
We'll stop at 6. and then we'll finish up in 3 since you're back with us.
All right, and verse 6 reads, in the morning sow thy seed, and in the evening withhold not thine hand. Withhold not thine hand, for thou knowest not whether shall prosper either this or that, or whether they both shall be alike good. So now this comes down to, if you have a job, you go to your job, and then when you come in, you have a part-time, or you want to start a business, just do it, because you may lose your job tomorrow, and the part-time or whatever you building on the side, that's what you can fall back on. Mm-hmm. So don't stay idle. You have people who rely only on the job that they give them, and then when they come home, they just sit around and watch TV, this, that, and that. Boom, they lose their job. They didn't have a backup, right? So you got to have a backup, because you don't know whether the company will go out of business, or you don't know if what you're working on, mm-hmm. which one will propel you, right, to be well off, right? So just keep working at both, because you don't know which one's gonna succeed. In the morning, you go work for the man. In the evening, work on something for yourself.
Yeah, what I was thinking about too is what the elder was bringing out during the service too, in that law about every day being payday,
right?
Where you divvy it up to where when you have laborers coming to work for you, like the parable that Christ gave, right? About the laborers, some come in the morning, some came at noon, some come in the afternoon, right?
Right.
But you make sure not to withhold your hand when it comes to paying for what it's like the whole thing going back to the whole like hoarding onto the opportunity that's present, instead of just considering how the Most High has taken provision for all things, even outside of things that you can see. Like you said earlier,
right.
Just do the right thing, right? Knowing that the Most High is going to make it work out in the end, even if at the moment it may seem like tight, it may be hard for you to see around the corner, but know that the Most High's favor is with you because you've shown favor to your brethren.
Right. It's like it's clear right there in verse 6. Like in the morning, plant. In the evening, plant again. Mm-hmm. If you have time, plant again, because mm-hmm. you don't know if the one that you plant in the morning is gonna grow, or you don't know if the one that you plant in the evening is gonna grow, or the both might grow. Mm-hmm. They might bring the both might bring result, or one might grow and one might not grow. So don't put your eggs in one basket, like they always say. Mm-hmm. Don't put your eggs in one basket. Don't rely on just one thing and thinking that this is it. That don't ever get too comfortable thinking that that's where you gotta put your livelihood.
Come. That wasn't so bad. I thought that was going to be a lot longer, but but it totally relates to what we're talking about, right? In Ecclesiastes 3 and 6, as far as the time to get and the time to lose, and then what that means. Just reading verse 6 by itself, you might just say, yeah, all right, I got it, I lose it,
Right, like I said, Ecclesiastes is like the life philosophy, an example based on his experience and what he went through, right? Verse 3 and 6.
Yeah, but I think Kabar was reading 3.
Right? 3 and 6.
Well, we already went through 6. We'll let him do 7 and 8, and we'll finish with 8.
Say that again.
7, and then in verse 8. Ecclesiastes 3, 7, and 8, and we'll stop at 8 for this little section here.
Okay. A time to rend and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak.
Right. So we like that first precept, a time to rend and a time to sow. Right. So we're talking about literal fabrics, but then we can also look at that on the figurative level, right? But now we see that example in the scriptures, right, with King Solomon, right, and how I think it was either King Solomon or Jeroboam, I forget what prophet he was dealing with, where he grabbed his garment and became rent, and he said, "Oh no," and the prophet said, "Oh no, it should happen this way. This is what this means." Because with the prophets, the Most High oftentimes use them to embody what they call symbolic gestures. it was saying do certain things. They represented something that pertained to the nation as a whole. So he explained to him, I'm not sure if it's Solomon or Jeroboam. When you go back to 1 Kings 11 and 12, chapters 11 and 12, it's there somewhere. But the rending represented the kingdom is now being split because remember it was united under David and then Solomon. But then after Solomon, it will become split between his son Rehoboam and his one of his princes, Jeroboam. It was the prince over Ephraim at that time. So we have that example in the scriptures. Well, I'm sure there's other personal things we can probably pull from that as well. It says, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, right? That's one we can't talk about enough, where we get to exercise this even in a classroom setting, but especially at camp, right? To where, and we learn this as we go on, we teach more and more, the art of doing more questioning instead of jumping in and giving answers all the time. Like we're talking about having a balance between questions and answers, and then asking the right questions, like the Swordsman's Code talks about. Only answer what you feel is necessary, right? Address one question at a time to keep things orderly, right? And sometimes just, observing and just listening, right? That's in the Swordsman's Code too. Not only read what the person is saying with their mouth, but read what they're saying with their body language. And then we did some classes on that, with the scriptures on that, as far as Proverbs talks about, look at someone's hands, someone's feet, someone's eyes, and their face in general, those being like key areas to look at when you're observing somebody, right? And just keeping silent. There's a saying they have in the world even that rings true where they say, 2 eyes, 2 ears, right? 1 mouth, right? So it's like, so by the divine design, if you will, right? We're made after the image of God, right? Even look at it on a literal level. You got 2 eyes, you got 2 ears, but you only got 1 mouth. So, the mouth must be something special, 1 tongue, as opposed to the eyes and ears, which you have 2 of those, which means you should be doing more of that than this, right? By doing more watching and more listening, you can spare yourself when it comes to your mouth or when it comes to your words. You don't have to say as much, just by sometimes asking the right questions and then just letting a person go. And I know we've seen that, I know other camps have done that too, where a strategy is to let the person kind of talk himself into a hole, right? They may come with some doctrine you never heard of before. They seem like they're accomplished, but then just by sitting back and letting them just expose himself with a brother who knows enough scriptures, even if he may not know everything the person is coming with, but as far as whatever they're into, he can find a gap, a chink in the armor, or a gap in the a rent in the garment, and say, "Oh, we got to deal with that right there." Boom, get that verse. So that's just an setting for camp, but that can also apply for other things too. Like in a work setting, we might be at a banquet, with like certain, MVPs, if you will, right? Whatever time period, whether it was back then or now, you had a function for like a company or a function for like a, city council or something. And, by you keeping silence, it's like you're esteemed that much more the wise, as opposed to you trying to use your words to make yourself more important. And there's a scriptures in Ecclesiastes that go into that very specifically, but we won't go into that tonight. We want to have you guys here all night, but that's what this is going into. So each of these verses can kind of be a class, really. But yeah, if you could read verse 8 as well, unless someone else has something they want to bring out in 7. Because I got a couple of verses. I'm just yeah.
Did you have something to bring up, Paul?
No, I was gonna say listening, and that part right there is, like you said, it's important. Listening, a time to listen, and a time to speak. That's even in the world, that communication skill. If you can gather that, you're gonna be in the top of top earners. If you can communicate, you can listen, because listening and communication is very useful, and that's where you get to communicate your ideas, what you think, how you feel about different things, but different events, how you feel about certain situation. If you can communicate that well, you'll be on the top earners. Right? You'll be one of the top earners because it's a skill that that's not everyone have that skill. Like the way we listen to women, listen to men these days is like women when we communicate, like a woman and a man communicate, it's totally different beings. We communicate differently, right? Sometimes we can see, we cannot listen to what everybody's saying because we don't understand that fact that women listen differently, men listen differently. So if you communicate each other, you got to understand that dynamic. And listening and all that it's very important when it comes to that. And that's why most of the time, people fall out in marriages because of lack of communication. When we gotta understand, when one says something, sometimes that's not what they mean. And when the other one says it, but you gotta understand the dynamic.
There's one that what does it say? There's one that all right, before I get this one, I'll get two. I'll just get two. So I know it's after 11. I'll just get two, and then we'll keep going. I don't have you guys too late. First, get Proverbs 17, 27 and 28. If you could read that, Gabar of Goshan.
It's the book of Proverbs, chapter 17, 27 and 28. He that has knowledge spareth his words, and a man of understanding is of an excellent spirit.
Right.
Keep going.
Even a fool, when he holdeth his peace, is counted wise, and he that shutteth his lips is esteemed a man of understanding.
So just two verses on the power of silence.
Right. And also too, I mean, I don't want to go too long into this. It's like in communication and relationship with people, with let's say with in a relationship. For example, the women will not always tell you what they think. Right? They're gonna tell you what they feel. And the man's gonna tell you what he thinks. And sometimes, they clash because as they listen and somebody tell you what they feel and you take offense to it, hey, that's not what they really thinking. That's how they feel in the moment as they speaking. And at the same time, the man may say something like, man, why are you acting so stupid? She catch feeling, right?
Okay.
She catch feelings, but it's not you're not being called stupid, but in the moment you acting like stupid. So there's a dynamic of communication, and if you don't understand that, communication breaks down, and then boom, next thing you know, everything just go haywire.
Yes, indeed. That's what we always talk about, right? Those filling in those W's the best we can, right? It's what we say and do, and it's why we say and do it. If you can garner both in every matter, be it small or a great matter, there's no distance how far you can go. But when you can't, that's where things get muddled. That's where things get difficult. And you can't really ascertain the why behind what someone said or what someone did, because it can be very tempting to make an assumption. Oh, they said that because of this. When you do a little more digging, you get a second or third opinion. You get 2 or 3 witnesses kind of talk about a situation. Oh yeah, because I saw her on an off day and she was doing this or he was saying that. And it's like, that's why he was in that mood. That's why he gave me that face. Like I'm sure you probably had a scenario where you just go to engage somebody, ask them a question. Before you say anything, they've already got a face looking at you like, why are you here? What are you about to do? And it's just like, dude, why are you even giving me that? I didn't say a thing. You already got your guard up. What's up? They don't even know me. You even know what I'm about to ask you. But you automatically have this. So you already have your mind made up about what I'm about. And it's like we just gotta be careful not to do that, because when it's done to you, you won't like it. But Ecclesiasticus, this is the verse I was looking for what we're talking about. Ecclesiasticus chapter 19 and 16, where it says, there is one that slippeth in his speech, but not from his heart. And who is he that hath not offended with his tongue? That's the one I was, you made me think of when you were saying that earlier, that other comment. So it's like, they slip with their speech. Oh, but it's not really where they were coming from. They really were coming from another place, even though what they said might have came off as like harsh, Or you get the response, which is like, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but I don't like the way you said it. I don't like how you said it. And even though you might be right, I don't like how you said it. So I'm just gonna just cast it behind my back. I don't want to hear it. It's how you said it. You got to deal with that sometimes. It's just like, okay. That's why, they call it food for thought. You got a nice prepared meal with seasoning, right? It comes with, food that comes out your mouth. And you got food kind of slapped together. Even though it's got the nutrients you need, you eat it. It's just like that. So that's like how our words are, right? So the mastery is to prepare your words in a way to where, they please the palate. They're pleasing to the taste. They have the proper seasoning.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot you could say about this. That's why I said men go to men to have a conversation. Women go to women to have a conversation because they think they emote their feelings together.
Mm-hmm.
The men, they talk logically, with each other.
Yeah.
But if they both understand, you coming from a feeling perspective and I'm coming from a logical perspective, I understand that. Let's level it out.
Come. Yeah, when you can discern those emotions, the emotional part of it, and get the reasoning behind the emotions, you can realize and understand how both are important. Because the Most High, right? He's not just like deadpan. No, the Most High is passionate about certain things. He's emotional too. But the key with the Most High is he's emotional when it comes to principle, with judgment, right? So that's what's key, right? For men and for women, right? Even for women who may be more emotional in situations, as long as your emotions are used towards a constructive end, we're not going to, we shouldn't shame a woman, let alone a man, for feeling a certain way, right? And if you feel a certain way that may lead you to choose to say or do something that might be unconstructive, you need to, hit the brakes, take a breather, do whatever you got to do to kind of vent that out, however you may do it, so that you don't say or do something to make the situation worse. That's what's key. Feel what you want to feel. Feel how you're going to feel about things, right? I guess it's be angry, but sin not. That's the key. To take whatever those emotions are and to use them towards a constructive end in the end. Because it's easy to get into that place of, oh, you shouldn't feel that way. And it's just like, don't do that. It's a matter of understanding why I feel this way in the situation and what to do with the feelings towards a generative, towards a constructive end. That's the better approach to take, as opposed to just denying the feelings or to minimize the feelings. But yeah, verse 8. I know we're going pretty late. Let's read verse Ecclesiastes 3 and 8 now. Let's try to deal with this. Let's try to be brief yet complete with the breakdown on Ecclesiastes 3 and 8, since that's our last one.
A time to love and a time to hate, a time of war and a time of peace.
All right, so time for another hour, right? We'll break down lick ups and scriptures. No, but yeah, it's true, right? When do we love? When do we hate? Who do we love? Who do we hate? Right? When do we have peace? When do we go to war? Who do we go to war with, and who do we make peace with? Right? I kind of added those questions onto this, especially looking at it from a scriptural standpoint, right? We're not only we're talking about dealing between each other when it comes to family, friends, associates, but also when it comes to us and our dealings with the other nations, and us in our dealing with the Most High, even, right? And they themselves, as far as what they've done and how they have to answer to the Most High, right? We can see that when it comes to the nations, they've all had their time in the sun, right? Esau being the last one, right? To have his quiet, but not really his peace. He might call it peace. We know it's just quiet because only through righteous rulership can you truly have peace. So we know it's just quiet for a time, but in the end, when it comes to even our people who ruled not according to the law, but with other nations, the best they can achieve is quiet, to where it may appear as though it's peace, but wars are brewing, and it's inevitable. And that's why we know when it comes to Esau, even before Christ make a second coming, even if Christ did make a second coming, just knowing the Most High's judgment, which is the Word, which is Christ Himself, we know that Esau's rulership, even though he's got all this power and insight and this control that we were talking about earlier over resources through technology and industry and things like that, the thing's going to collapse on itself, right? He's already at war. We can't have peace, right? He's talking about love and love, love this, but he doesn't even love himself, given the body he's been given. All he can do is hate himself and push hatred towards others because he hates himself. And then maybe in some cases, he's not even really even aware that what he says and does shows that he hates himself. So like I said, I'm just pulling it from an aspect of different nations and you're kind of doing it from a grand scheme, but this can also be drawn down on a more personal level as well, right?
And not to also forget the theme of what we're reading here too is the Mosai fixed the time for all these things.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty much what the key is to this right here. It fixed the time for love, the time, to hate, a time for peace, and the time for war. The Mosai is the one that fixed the time for all these things, not us. He fixed it.
Yeah. Positively. With 3 and 8, we can also, of course, we can put Malachi chapter 1, verses 1 to 3. You just write it down. As well as Romans 9 and 13. And we talk about Jacob and Esau on that grander scheme. And then you could also write down these two verses too. And what I was talking about as far as the best the heathen can achieve is quiet. Isaiah 48 and 22. Isaiah 48 and 22. Also, you can write down Isaiah 57 and 21, which says the same thing. Isaiah 57 and 21. And then also one more. First Maccabees chapter 1. In verse 3. It's talking about Alexander coming to power, and it talks about how the earth was quiet before him. So there's peace and quiet, and there's just quiet. No the difference. All right, so now Go to I want to get these parables real quick on when. Why when is important. Why timing is important, right? Even when timing is not so much convenient for you, why it's just important to, like you were saying earlier, do the right thing, even if it may feel like a hindrance, but it'll do thee well in the end. Even though it may seem like it's a detriment to you in the moment, you're doing well to the person that you're helping out. Luke chapter 11. In verse 5. Luke chapter 11, verse 5. And we'll read down to 8. And if you, I'll read this one. So Luke 11 and 5, it says, and he said unto them, this is Christ talking, which of you shall have a friend, and shall go unto him at midnight, and say unto him, friend, lend me 3 loaves. For a friend of mine in his journey is come to me, and I have nothing to set before him. And he from within shall answer and say, trouble me not, the door is now shut, and my children are with me in bed. I cannot rise and give thee. I say unto you, though he will not rise and give him, because he is his friend, yet because of his importunity, he will rise and give him as many as he needeth. You see? So what do you guys think about that there before I say anything? Just curious. What's Christ saying here?
What was that? Who was that again? 10 or what? Who was that? 10 and what?
11, 5 to 8.
Oh, that was 11.
I don't think.
You want to know what we all thought about that?
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure if you heard it while I was reading. If you were still looking for it.
No, I read it. I just lost it when I was trying to write it down.
Oh, okay.
All right, we'll take it apart. Which one do you want us to break down on that? 8 or 5?
Start wherever you think is appropriate.
All right, we'll start at 5. We might as well go rehearse the whole thing. And he said unto them, which of you shall have a friend, and shall go unto him at midnight, and say unto him, friend, lend me 3 loaves of bread. All right, so which of you shall have a friend, and you go unto him at midnight? You put your friend on the spot at midnight, hour that you shouldn't be going over people's houses, right? But it's your friend, and I guess you in need of this bread.
Okay.
Okay. For a friend of mine in his journey has come to me, and I have nothing to set before him. So that means that his boy came to him and asked him for something, so he ain't got nothing for his friend. And he from within shall answer, say, trouble me not, the door is now shut, my children are with me in bed, I cannot rise and give thee. So your boy refused to lend you anything to give to your friend that was in a journey. I say unto you, though he will not rise and give him, because he is his friend, yet because of his importunity, he will rise and give him as many as he needeth. Now, I think that was the end of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because of his importunity, I guess importunity is at the opportunity of giving him, he didn't really want to do it, but he would do it because he really in need or something like that.
Okay.
But I never heard importunity. I heard opportunity means you have the chance to give.
I got importunate up on the big screen.
Oh, you do? I can't see it. Yeah, I have to get up there and look.
Okay.
Yeah.
And as you come up, be quiet, share your points. And I'll share it on the screen because for folks that are still with us watching, I'll share it on the big screen.
Right, because he goes to the person at midnight, right?
Mm-hmm.
The reason why he would even dare to go to the person at midnight is because the person is his friend. That's the number one.
It's reliable.
Right. He's because nobody would go to a stranger and not ask at midnight. The only reason why he seek the opportunity is because that's his friend. So now, if the friend already closed the door, he's ready to go to sleep. Right? If the friend, even though the opportunity is I go to a friend, not a stranger. That's number one. So now that's already identified.
Mm-hmm.
So now the friend answered. He said, yes, I'm there, but I'm already asleep. The door is locked and my kid's already sleeping. The fact that he's a friend, now you got to persist. You got to knock on the door. Because he's your friend, he's going to get up and give you that bread. But the key is, don't be ashamed to ask because that's your friend. Don't be ashamed to ask because you go there and you're going to do something good, right? Hospitality, right? It's not that you're going to do something for yourself. You're going to go and receive somebody who drove from far, and you go to your friend to knock on the door. That's why the Most High said, knock, it shall be open, and seek, you shall find. So knock on the door, persist that he get up because that's your friend. If it's your friend, don't be ashamed. Because you know you're not doing your friend a disservice, or you're not going to them for your own selfishness. You're looking for good. So that's why you knock on the most on Yahushua's door, Yahushua would not refuse it.
Okay, nice. I like it. I like it. I like what I think what both you brothers had to say. I thought was on point as far as what you guys were talking about. But yeah, that importunity, we don't hear that word a lot. But yeah, it pretty much just means it's just kind of like the opposite of opportunity. It just means urgent or persistent in solicitation.
Right.
Sometimes normally so.
Right. And also, you know who, that's why Yahushua said, and except you be like those little children, you shall not enter into the kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
You know what little children will do? When they want something from their parents, they persist and they will not stop until they get it.
Yeah. That's facts. Oh yeah. Ask it forwards, ask it backwards.
Yeah.
Ask it inside out, ask it outside in. Yeah. Even they even take a pause sometimes, watch them.
When you think they forget, they say, yeah.
No, you're gonna do it, right?
You give them chores to do after they finish the chore, you think they done? Now they come right back to the same thing. That's persistence.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. So emphasis on the when. We see this parable speaking to that, right? That shouldn't be something like you said, a hindrance to ask for your friend that's in need, even though it's like at as they would call it, an ungodly hour, right? And we see that when timing coming up other places too, sometimes in a more comical fashion. But let me get this real quick in Proverbs on when as well. Let me see. I just thought of this now. I have to add this to my list later. So I just gotta write this down real quick. Yeah. This is in Proverbs 27 also, just like we were at before. So Proverbs 27. You could read this book quiet, Baba Bashar. Get Proverbs 27 and read verse 14.
It's the same thing. What's his name? Jacob.
Mhm.
He was persistent. He said, "Nah, you're gonna bless me. You ain't gonna get out of here. You gotta bless me." He said, "The day break, I gotta go down here. You ain't gonna get out of here. You gotta bless me."
That's a good example.
Proverbs what?
27 and 14.
I don't understand.
Proverbs 27 and verse 14. He that blesseth his friend with a loud voice, rising early in the morning, it shall be counted a curse to him.
So it's like another point of wisdom on the timing. But in this scenario, it's like with the scenario on Luke, there was a necessity, right? A need. Like we talk about how to keep the Sabbath day, right? Without abusing the Sabbath day. When to apply grace. Whereas with this, it's just like, could have been avoided, you know? Whereas in the other scenario on Luke, it's like, it wasn't even opportune for the person to knock at that time, but because the person had necessity, right? That's the only reason why, the importunity would get a pass, as far as, like you said, the being consistent, the being persistent, right? To get what one desires. In that case, the loaves of bread. Whereas there's ways to greet your friend in the morning, that don't involve something like this. And then I got it's in 3 Gospels. I'm just gonna get the one that's in Mark 13 though.
27 and 14, right?
Yeah, of Proverbs. You have something you want to say on that before because I have one more verse and we can wrap up.
Right.
Unless someone else has something they want to bring up.
Yeah, this one is like is in 27. It's like it's being excessive.
Mm-hmm.
Being excessive. Yeah, you saying good morning, but why you gotta be so loud? Right? You're greeting me good morning, but you ain't got. It's early in the morning, right? You gotta be so loud. That's pretty much what this one is saying. Yeah.
Okay, so Mark 13. I think about it too, like your friends like downstairs, you're upstairs, may have your window open, right? So breeze can come in. And then your friend is at yells from downstairs. Yo, what's up, man?
Early in the morning.
You ready to have a stand-up day today? Let's do it. You pull up the window, you look out the window with the bloodshot eyes, like, you don't shut that down. I'm gonna come down there, rip your head off. Not to mention, if you had neighbors, they pop their heads out the windows too, like, yo, you better go and get your boy. Yo, like that. We about to have a problem. This better not be the norm. This may not be a regular thing. We're not on some military barracks, doing our morning jogging. Come on, man. Because Mark 13, let's start from 32. And like the bar, if you could read that, public show. Mark 13 and 32.
But of that day and that hour knoweth no man, no not the angels which are in heaven, neither the Son, but the Father.
Right. So only the Most High knows everything. as much as Christ knows, as powerful as Christ is on his right hand, even he himself doesn't know which day he's coming back. So we always like to use this verse just to show anyone at camp or just in any setting when we're teaching, when they want to say, "Oh yeah, I listened to this church or this pastor or this priest or this whoever, and they said Christ coming back at this date." Y2K Christ, or what was it? 2012. Remember, 2012 was the date. Was it December 2020 something? 21st? 2012. That's the date, right? Yeah, certain people pushing that, and then that day came and went, and the pastor that pushed it kind of like went to the side and looked for a little while and tried to come back later on. But you won't see him being held to the fire like they should. You said that God said XYZ. That didn't happen. Who are you talking to? They hope that you forgot. I think that's that one guy, Harold Camping. I think his name was. He was pushing that 2012 doctrine. A lot of people listening to him, like the Pied Piper playing his flute. So only the Most High knows. But we don't want to verse 33.
Take ye heed, watch and pray, for ye know not when the time is.
So it says, take heed and watch and pray, for ye know not when the time is. Right? We see the things happening, right? All the things that Christ told his disciples, right? The famines, the pestilences, the earthquakes in diverse places, wars, rumors of wars, false hymn, right? False Christ coming, right? To deceive many. We see all that happening, but yet and still, there's still more that has to happen, as Christ told them, as he's telling them here. We don't.
For the Son of Man is a man taking a far journey, who left his house and gave authority to his servants and to every man his work, and commanded the porter to watch.
Right. So now he's going to a similitude where he says, it's like a man took on a far journey. He left his house and gave authority to his servants, those that kept his house, and to every man his work. Everyone had their duty within the house to keep it up, and commanded the porter to watch. His job was like a doorman, right? Or like someone was on the wall or something looking to keep watch out. Because a watch was like somebody pretty much keeping the, what do you call it? Keeping watch out for like different things that are happening outside, right? People coming, people going, threats coming, right? Especially because walls were like a defense for a city. We don't.
Watch ye therefore, for ye know not when the master of the house cometh, at even, or at midnight, or at the cock crowing, or in the morning.
Right. So if you break down the days, when you read the scriptures, right? John 11:9 in particular, Christ talks about there being 12 hours in a day, right? Plus 12 hours a night makes 24 hours total. Give or take, depending what time of year it is, right? It averages out. So the Romans broke the nights out into like 4 watches, whereas with the Hebrews, we did it in three groups of 4 hours. They did 4 groups of 3 hours, right? We see Christ here using the Roman style, which is the 4 groups of 3-hour watches. That's why he mentions those watches as far as the even, the midnight, the cock crowing, or the morning, right? The different phases of the night. So he's saying you won't know when the master's coming, right? Once again, the importance of taking heed to when, right? We talked about the likelihood of something happening. How many times does something happen within a given period of time? How many divided by when? We don't.
Lest coming suddenly he find you asleep or sleeping.
Right. Lest coming suddenly he find you sleeping. I always use the example of when we're kids and our folks leave, right? And we say, or the parents say, all right, we have to go and run some errands. I leave you and your siblings. I need to make sure y'all have this housework done by the time we get back, right? Sweep the floor, mop, vacuum, dust, whatever you got to do, right? And then, when the folks leave, it's like, oh, it's party time, right? It's time to have fun with your siblings, right? We're goof off, maybe watch a movie, play some games, whatever, right? But now time can easily slip away, and folks get done running their errands. Then they pop back up. You see them pull up the road or pull up in the driveway, right? If you have a driveway, or pull up in front of the house, you see their lights. Now you and your siblings are kind of shuffling back and forth. Oh, dad and mom are home. Oh man, we didn't get anything done. You trying to rush to scramble, try to get things in order, and then when your folks come, they can pretty much tell if you did your work and then decide to have a little fun, or if you were just BSing. They see you still in there working on stuff. It's just like you're going to be in trouble. We were gone for a whole 2-3 hours. This is what we come back to. They might decide to crack the whip, put you on punishment, or do something else, or maybe give you a pass if you're lucky, but probably not. We know when it comes to them, Christ coming back, there won't be any passes given. This is the pass right now. We're in it. That's what I was saying earlier in the service, right? If Christ is not back yet, whether you're just coming into the truth, whether you've been in the truth for a minute, been inconsistent, whether you've been in the truth for a minute, fell off the bandwagon, and then are coming back into the truth, right? There's all types of scenarios, right, that we've experienced these last couple of decades since the 70s, since we've been waking up. If Christ is not back yet, that means that there's another day to get it better, to do it better than you did it the previous day. Now is the time. He hasn't, the folks have not come back to check on your housework to see if you finish your duties, right? Now is the time to wake up so that Christ don't pop up and, like you say, catch you sleeping, which we know this is talking spiritual, where he'll pop up, people will be awake, but they'll be spiritually sound asleep. They'll be breaking the Sabbath. They'll be keeping the wicked holidays of the world, right? They'll be fornicating. They'll be getting high. They'll be, eating unclean meat. They'll be doing all the stuff that they were told or shown that we shouldn't do, right? But then they fell back. And I'll quote what another brother said. It'll be the big "I told you so" day, right? That's what the kingdom will be. Or I should say the day of the Lord will be the big "I told you so" day, to where those that are still in the truth, that stood the course, that didn't, go to sleep as far as dying in Christ in this life, because some of us, have died in righteousness in this life, right? They're going to join those of us that remain, that are still in the truth, that are still walking a straight and narrow path. We'll look forward. We'll love his appearing, like it says in the other scripture. But for others that get caught sleeping, they'll be watching those of us that are not only called but chosen go up into the chariot, just like Christ went up into the cloud way back when, after being with the disciples 40 days and nights. We'll go up like he already went up. We'll go up the same way to meet with Christ in the air. It tells us in Thessalonians. And those of us that were sleeping, we'll be beholding them along with the other nations, going, "No, take us with you. We want to listen now." And we'll be saying, those of us that are part of that chosen, we go up saying,
Will we even have that time when the bombs are dropping?
Say what?
I said, will we even have that time when the bombs are dropping?
I'm just being figurative,
Right, that's what I'm saying.
If depending on how fast we go up, who knows, we might, there might be as we go up, but I could definitely see someone yelling out saying, "Take me," because the scripture's talking about the heathen cursing God as a destruction, as the fire's falling on them in that last day. So I wouldn't put it past some of us that are part of that 2/3. At least it'll be known in that day who the 2/3 are, yelling up saying, "Oh," being remorseful at the last moment, but it's just like too late. Now is the time. You didn't take the time. Now your time is up.
We just hope that we make it all the way through. We won't even know.
Absolutely.
Is that the same thing with the oil in the lamp? Is that the same, comparing that?
Yeah, you can compare those two. Con. Yeah, you could definitely compare that. Mm-hmm. That's like the armor of God, right? Got to make sure you have all your pieces on. Helmet of salvation, breastplate of righteousness, shield of faith. Was it truth on your loins or your midsection? Preparation on your feet, because with the one with the oil, the girls that didn't have the oil, their feet weren't shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace, right? As a matter of speaking, to speak to the parable. You can read 37 and then we'll close out.
Verse 37?
Mm-hmm.
Did we skip 36?
Nope.
Oh, we just jumping to 37.
No, we just spent the whole time talking about 36. I said, I'm going to be caught sleeping when Christ comes back. And the 1/3 is being beamed up. Would you say Bakwa? Would you say Bakwa?
Oh,
Wow. Well, there it
okay,
is.
I was reading something else.
No, you were reading the right thing. I think you maybe your spirit was somewhere.
No, I actually was in 14 instead of 13.
Oh, you were okay. You when you went back to the Bible, you went back to the wrong place. That's
Yeah,
what you mean. Okay.
All right. And what I say unto you, I say unto all, watch.
There it is. So keep watch. So it's literal as far as the watchman. We could look at that act of spiritually being a watchman when it comes to taking heed to the signs of the times, right? As we get closer and closer to that day. And kind of see in the comments here, listen with your mind. Yeah, that's a good way to use that scripture as far as Mark 13:32 to show, yeah, if they're all one, if it's God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Ghost, and they're all the one God, right? How come they wouldn't know what the other knows, right? Like, what's to separate that if they're all one anyway? As far as the way they look at it, whereas the way we break it down, according to the scriptures, is they're on one accord, even though there's roles and ranks. Christ is on the right hand of God, but he's not the Most High God. Right? The Holy Spirit is very important, but it's not the Most High. The Most High is responsible for the Word. The Most High is responsible for the Holy Ghost. The Most High is responsible for wisdom. Right? They're all second to Him. Mm-hmm. So they can't be all one. So yes, that's a good way to use that verse. That's the wild. All right. So thank you for bearing with us. I really didn't think we were going to go that long, but I'm glad we got to go through those parables and go into some of those other scriptures to kind of get more deeper into this whole idea or concept of risk, but more so from a righteous standpoint. When we look at the likelihood of something happening times the consequence, that's the definition they give, but then really just to show in the scriptures, how it's always been there as far as the idea of the risk of the gamble that we take every day, but at the same time, how to work towards having things work in our favor, even though we know we can always have or find misfortune at the hand of the Most High. At the same time, you're better off at least having the Most High's favor, right? Or being at least in the Most High's good graces to where you can say with confidence, yeah, I did the right thing in every situation, to the best of my ability, the best I could, given wherever I was at. Whatever comes after that, I can't control, but I just focused on the things that I can control, and those things that I can control, I tried to do the best I could with those things. Let me just read these last two verses, and then we'll close out unless anyone else has any other questions or comments. But this is Jeremiah 9. Jeremiah chapter 9, in verse 23. So Jeremiah chapter 9 and verse 23, I'm going to read 24 as well. It reads, Once again, Jeremiah chapter 9, verse 23. Thus saith the Lord, let not the wise man glory in his wisdom, neither let the mighty man glory in his might, let not the rich man glory in his riches, but let him that glorieth glory in this, that he understandeth and knoweth me, that I am the Lord, or the Yahweh, which exercise loving kindness, judgment, and righteousness in the earth. For in these things I delight, saith Yahweh. Right? So that's what's key. Nothing wrong with being known for those things, right? Nothing wrong for your glory being wisdom, or your glory being might, or your glory being riches. But unless you have unless you have verse 24 in your heart and or mind, what's it worth? What's your wisdom worth? What's your riches worth, right? What's your might worth? So then the other one that goes with this is Ecclesiastes chapter 9. Ecclesiastes is like a favorite tonight, right? Ecclesiastes chapter 9 in verse 11 and verse 12. Ecclesiastes chapter 9 verses 11 and 12. So Ecclesiastes 9:11. It reads, I returned and saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, neither yet bread to the wise, nor yet riches to men of understanding, nor yet favor to men of skill. It says, but time and chance happeneth to them all. You see that? So yes, we try to mitigate and avoid risk the best we can through spiritual first, then carnal means, right? You're trying to make the best choice, the best decision, right? In different scenarios, especially when it comes to great matters. But yet we still acknowledge that even with all our right choosing, the best we can with, making a diligent search to make sure things are certain when it comes to judgment, that you can still just have a bad day, fall upon misfortune, even you cross T's and dot I's, right? This can happen because it's just the things you're not in control of. But the things that you are in control of, just make the most of them. And that way, at least you can rest easy when bad times come, because you know you did all you could possibly do given the situation. Verse 12 says, for man also knoweth not his time, as the fishes that are taken in an evil net, and as the birds that are caught in the snare, so are the sons of men snared in an evil time, when it falls suddenly upon them. So yeah, we're not saying don't do your due diligence, try to know and try to plan and try to enact certain things. Ecclesiastes chapter 9, 11, and then 12. It's not to say you don't try to put things in place, right? To have, as far as like a fail safe, to hand on to your family, to your friends, to your next of kin, to your whatnot, right? That's all part of wisdom. We saw our forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, do that, right? But at the same time, just know that, that misfortune can come at any time, right? And I think our forefathers are perfect examples to look at for that, right? Where Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob always had an inheritance to hand down to those that came after them, right? To have things in place when they knew their days were up. But yet they themselves, on different occasions, were faced with different trials, yet and still they overcame them through their trust and obedience in the Most High. Okay, we'll make an end here. We just hit a 0 hour. I hope everybody was edified by the new moon lesson as far as going into a risk. Looking at it from a worldly standpoint, we might study for class or for school or for certification or training, but then bring it into the Most High's domain, looking at some different scriptures in the wisdom books like Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, as well as weighing those with the different parables of Christ to gain more insight into that topic as well. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. And I'll just say once again, all praise to the Most High in Christ by way of the Holy Spirit. Definitely, you guys enjoy the new moon as much as you can. if you have to work, just try to just definitely stay in the spirit. Continue to meditate on the scriptures. If you're able to, enjoy the day, enjoy it off in righteousness, then definitely do so. Despite all the different festivities going on this weekend in the world, as we see happening in our different major cities here in America. So with that, we'll say Laila Tawab Wa Ashar Ashar Kadash, can't even remember it. Happy New Moon. And like we see down here, Ashar Kadash Rabbiaya Yasharala, which just means Happy Fourth New Moon, Israel. And with that, we'll do the closing prayers. We took a watch, just about a watch, a Roman watch, that is 3 hours, as opposed to the Hebrew watch, 4 hours. Barakateh Hawa by Shemi Hawashai, Sharanth Nanao Paria Gapan Thuaraman. La Hawa by Shemi Hawashai, Av Yashara. English translation. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, that gives to us the fruit of the vine. Thank you, so be it. To Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, with Israel.
To what?
Uh-oh. At Madwa, Panyuwai Roshlam, stand and face Jerusalem. Yahweh, Ba'asham, Yahweh Shai, Babakushai, Shemai, Lanawa, Aifa, Yem Yem, Aifa, Shalak, Maika Allah, Waha'alahayim, Tazwadakim, La, Shema Al, Barak, Rapah, Magun, Wachazayak, Banya, Yasharala, Washalak, Lanawa, Rabiim, Kakama, Rabiim, Da'aith, Rabiim, Bayanah, Rabiim, Sabalanwa, Rabiim, Amawan, Rabiim, Aqua, Rabiim, Ahabiim, Rabiim, Haganah, Rochanaya, Wasalak, Ko, Katayamnawa, La Akim, Wa Akiwa, Wayasha'ala, Thumyad, Waiwalam, Ba'asham, Yahawashai, the water, Aman. English translation, Yahweh. In the name of Yahweh Shai, please listen to us now, right now. Send Mike on the righteous powers to watch over, bless, heal, protect, and make strong the children of Israel. And send to us much wisdom, much knowledge, much understanding, much patience, much faith, much brotherhood, much love, much spiritual protection, and forgive all our sins. For the brothers, sisters in Israel, always and forever, in the name of Yahweh Shai, thank you, so be it. Four Corners Prayer. Yahweh, Ba'asham, Yahweh Shai, Barak Nawa, Wayasha'ala, Wabat Yasaparim, Shema Yasharele, Yahweh, Elohim, Yahweh, Akhed, English translation. Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, bless us in Israel in the house of books or the school. And then we said, Hear, O Israel, Lord our God is one Lord. Prayer for the food. Yahweh, Gadawo, Basham, Madawanya, Yahweh Shai, Babakushai, Barak, Makal, Yanawa, Shatayawa, Yanawa, Yayan, Yanawa, Lakham, Yanawa, Shakara, Yanawa, Zakhag, Shah, Hakadash, Basham, Yahweh Shai, Thawara, Aman. All right, with that, we'll say Shah Kadash once again, Wa Laila Tawab. Thank you all for joining. Hope you enjoyed. Enjoy the feast. Have a good night. Shalom.
Shalom.
You should see Gabar when he's doing the prayer. When they get to Yayan, the man